Ever. Fuck, I can't hear no sound, man.
My son, never show mercy.
Niggas couldn't handle what I went through. Not without a meal, I done been through. Jumped off the porch, got into. Clicky was sticky on hippie, I got you. Know you my nigga, I got you. Out in this shit, I didn't have to. Word in this shit, he didn't have to. Stayed in this shit, he didn't have to. Vontae gave his life for this shit. For us to be known on our shit. Beefing with niggas that ain't about shit. I start my day off with pool on the fifth. This one for Queez, where nigga I miss. Talk to God, but it's like he don't exist. Open your eyes up and see what I'm seeing. It clicky my niggas, that's all I believe in. Vontae gang on my reps and I'm not breathing. I love my dog, forever in pain. Lost the loot, nothing I can gain. Off of this life I'm living is a dream. I wanna wake up again. Love all my niggas, we all going through it. They gave it life and I felt like I blew it. He was the right one and them niggas knew it. If I can get my life ahead, then I would. Low for Henny, stand roll up a wood. Hitting blocks out and been in every hood. If I go fit about this shit, bitch, I'm good. If I go fit about this shit, bitch, I'm good. Without a meal, I done been through. Jumped off the porch, got into. Clicky was sticky on hippie, I got you. Know you my nigga, I got you. Out in this shit, I didn't have to. Word in this shit, he didn't have to. Stayed in this shit, he didn't have to.
Gripping tops, look for ops while I'm cruising. Flipping blocks as an op execution. I done made it out so many shootings. Taking risks, it's the life of a nuisance. Get rid if I'm caught with the toolie. Ducking cops, ain't no more prosecution. Had me locked in like 4 institutions. Fuck the feds, I'm not writing down names. And them chains I done fought on the game. 100 years and I still will not change. They take picture, bitch, put it in frames. We lost niggas and I still feel the pain. Then lost brother to motherfucking lanes. It took quits and it made me insane. We can't say killer, we gon' skin you. If you ain't no shooter, we gon' bench you. Don't wrestle with the Glock, gon' pin you. It's on sight, 4 pipes in a run to. These niggas ain't real, they pretend to. Niggas can't handle what I went through. No food, no lights, and a rent due. And me and Queez tryna strike on the monsters.
Not without a meal, I done been through. Jumped off the porch, got into. Clicky was sticky on hippie, I got you. Know you my nigga, I got you. Out in this shit, I didn't have to. Word in this shit, he didn't have to. Stayed in this shit, he didn't
when
have to.
When the gang, nigga, trigger gon' blitz. Right around town, nigga, blocks I been. Think about Queez, nigga, why I reminisce. Smoke a baby lens, why I slap behind 10. Nigga, I ain't gon' lie, man, I really need to vent. RP say, man, that shit happen quick. Ever since then, man, I been on defense. Run up on a nigga, shake their ears like a pit. Nigga, run with Dracos like your boy got permit. Who the hop out, leave a fuck nigga stiff. Running on the rap, she a puff like gifts. You know, hop out with that big 4-5. Forever in the game, man, that nigga gon' bang. Man, pistol face 30 years for a chain. Hop out that, turn that boy to a stain. Get on Broadway, nigga, then we switch lanes.
Niggas couldn't handle what I went through. Not without a meal, I done been through. Jumped off the porch, got into. Clicky was sticky on hippie, I got you. Know you my nigga, I got you. Out in this shit, I didn't have to. Word in this shit, he didn't have to. Stayed in this shit, he didn't have to. Vontae gave his life for this shit. For us to be known on our shit. Beefing with niggas that ain't about shit. I start my day off with pool on the fifth. This one for Queez, where nigga I miss. Talk to God, but it's like he don't exist.
I got in my bag and niggas started hating. Back when I ain't have it, man, they didn't say shit. They act like they helping, but hoping we don't make it. I know it's our time, we just gotta be patient. I got in my bag and niggas started hating. Back when I ain't have it, man, they didn't say shit. They act like they helping, but hoping we don't make it. I know it's our time, we just gotta be patient. We gotta be patient, but I'm tired of waiting. Niggas, they be faking, acting like we ain't it. Oh, I heard you stole my style, fuck around and trace it. Y'all talk about the same shit, man, I swear they say. But I'm headed to the top, money I get a lot. Probably caught me a drop top, just to get some head a lot. Don't say you getting bread, cause we know you not. I know niggas that be whipping, don't even own a pot. Ay, I'ma get the dough now, count it up later. Line a nigga up, but ain't giving no tapers. 200 for a verse, ain't doing no favors. I'ma cop me a grip, 100. It's a I got in my bag and niggas started hating. Back when I ain't have it, man, they didn't say shit. They act like they helping, but hoping we don't make it. I know it's our time, we just gotta be patient. I got in my bag and niggas started hating. Back when I ain't have it, man, they didn't say shit. They act like they helping, but hoping we don't make it. I know it's our time, we just gotta be patient.
Hey, we just gotta be patient. Now trying the studio was sitting in the basement. Now we taking trips on vacation. Hellcats we racing, backwoods we facing. With a love I'm so influenced, yeah. To the back I'm getting to it, yeah. Cause she love the way I do it. I love the way she move it. To the back she get into it. When the money looking right, and no pockets looking tight. I won't die without a fight. Clutching hard when I'm at night. See I rap about the struggle, cause this life is just a tussle. When it flesh it got no muscle. When you flex without no muscle. I got in my bag and niggas started hating. Back when I ain't have it, man, they didn't say shit. They act like they helping, but hoping we don't make it. I know it's our time, we just gotta be patient. I got in my bag and niggas started hating. Back when I ain't have it, man, they didn't say shit. They act like they helping, but hoping we don't make it. I know it's our time, we just gotta be patient.
Like you lost another one.
Heart of the church. Heart of the church. From the heart of the trenches, I be in the heart of the trenches. Hit the full image, I live it. The internet make it convince on. A lawyer keep calling like I can't spend it. I'm blaming my co-defendant. I could've bought a tombstone for his grace, meant it all on my image. VVA pendant, he caught his expensive. Purple jeans and some purple linen. In the heart of the trenches. Standing on business like SOBOD right now, he the heart of the trenches. AIs were fully extended. My reach got extended. Lock with a switch and extended. My money extended. I lost my man and it took me a minute. I put a C in a necklace. I grab 50 on my checklist. What's the temperature I'm checking? 100 socks to send a message. The VVA messy, my bitch and her friend they get messy. The drink can get messy. I am not buying that shit that they sellin'. I go out to tally and mail it. Story to tell, I can tell it. Black with no hammer, I nail it. I don't know why niggas jealous. I gave my all for the game, we claim, and I could've kept. Give up my heart, could've kept. Say you love me, but you could've kept it. But nigga, I bleed. That body shit I believe. I can't take it easy. My brother might leave me. From the heart of the trenches, I be in the heart of the trenches. Hit the full image, I live it. The internet make it convince on. A lawyer keep calling like I can't spend it. I'm blaming my co-defendant. I could've bought a tombstone for his grace, meant it all on my image. This VVA pendant, he caught his expensive. Purple jeans and some purple linen. In the heart of the trenches. Standing on business like SOBOD right now, he the heart of the trenches. AIs were fully extended. My reach got extended. Lock with a switch and extended. My money extended. I lost my man and it took me a minute. I'm in the scene with Bino. Just got a bag full of C-notes. Drake keep a stick in the Pico. He go wherever that I go. Just got them bells from Yago. Ain't ducking no beef, I love taco. I'm only cracking the seal with Rado. Not gelato, I know when it's Marlo. I'm checking the bag with Fargo. I'm easing the pain with these narco. Hit the pump with the blitz like I'm Nardo. 4 pockets full, blow my cargo. I paint the picture Picasso. I 65 in the Tahoe. Who has a heart I can borrow? They teeing up to my sorrow. And I took to the chin Johnny Bravo. I need to end all the bickering that niggas having us hollow. He go wherever that I go. From the heart of the trenches, I be in the heart of the trenches. I be in the heart of the trenches. Before an image, I live at the internet, make it convincing. Yeah.
Fuck it, I'ma pump my shit. Fuck rap, I'm back on my bully. No cowboy, these niggas pussy. Come down with the devil, that's boogie. We're killer, don't tell him to push. Yeah, that deal should stay on my hoodie. I'm wearing it, bagging them cookies. I'm loud cause niggas be rookies. No rapper, bitch, you gotta book me. Yeah, I ain't never threw no flags. You ain't never zipped no bag. I can't salute no bad. Switch on the glick of the shoot so fast. Nigga know noose gon' flash. Nigga know a truce don't last. Pull up, shoot no glass. I had a little gang, I'll you your ass. He got them bells, bro, them they on them. Glitters for sale. Tell him I want them. I walk them down. I'm on my lonesome. I'm out that murder. I thought I shown them. Pray for my ops and my opponents. I already read it. I'ma disown them. Good overkill. You get a bonus. My hit is bitch to get my condolence. He lacking his cracking, they smacking, I'm on them. Trapping the trap like I'm jacking, I want them. Throwing it back, got it clapping and moaning. I'm killing the pussy, then whacking her home. Light up the pack down bag of phony. She'll be back, I'm acting like Tony. That bitch ain't a snack, she a pack of bologna. I need that cat like mine, Corona. Brand new glizzy, I'm trying to test it. I'm sending bullets, ain't in the Texas. Shells delivered, they get the message. I flip a block, something like Texas. Niggas ain't eating, they anorexic. Nigga be shitty, just on my exes. Paying for pussy, I'm a finesse. You riding the dick and put on my neck. Straight out the trenches, I'm a little reckless. I pop a perk and I get aggressive. Making a squirt, I give her the best. They tell her to twerk, she doing the best shit. Say a shooter, I don't respect like I got a drum. Hey, I with breasts. I heard my ops, bought all the vests. Ain't with the gang, then you better exit. Yeah. Say a shooter, I don't respect it. I got a drum, hey, I with breasts. Woo. I heard my ops, bought all the vests. Ain't with the gang, then you better exit. Who wanna walk? Cause I'm the sickest. I'm smoking ops, and I can mix it. Told her to swap. I want a thick bitch, I want some top. Put on the lips, fuck out the spot. You look suspicious, too many Glocks. Think I'm addicted, too many shots. Don't let me click it. Another op, scratch off the hit list. Did too many shots, don't let me click it. Another op, scratch off the hit list. Did too many shots, don't let me click it. Another op, scratch off the hit list.
Spectrum brings us Spectrum One, where Spectrum Internet, advanced Wi-Fi, and unlimited mobile come together to keep you seamlessly connected wherever you are!
Why did you switch?
With Spectrum One, we get a super fast, reliable connection.
And the advanced Wi-Fi has enhanced security and privacy features that automatically block online threats.
How reliable is Spectrum Mobile?
It's a super reliable service coast to coast.
Switch to Spectrum One and get internet for $49.99 a month, plus free advanced Wi-Fi and one free line of unlimited mobile. Visit a Spectrum store today.
I'm no eco-warrior, but I just made us 3 delicious Morningstar Farm spicy black.
It's Dolph. It's that real nigga shit. That South Memphis shit, nigga. That West Side Gary shit.
In my trap house, we got shooters at the door.
Yeah.
I can show you some shit that you ain't never seen before. Can't compare our prices, nigga. Everything for the low. Just a microwave, illegal water, ain't no stove. Couple couches, ain't no bed. I've been in the same clothes, the same fuck, sitting in the same damn bowl. Looked out on the window, everything must be sold. Going platinum out my trap, motherfucker, going gold. What you need, nigga? I got what you need, my nigga. That money talk, you can't get no front from me, my nigga. Couple shooters in the house, WW3 issues, banana clip, bay, I let that 223 hit you. All my niggas from the hood got stripes, referee official. They move up in silence, nobody telling on me, my nigga. What's up, baby? Marshall Street, born in 93 with killers. I guess my pops must have none of the evil see, my nigga. Seen it all as a baby, that's why that shit right there don't face it. My bitch got the nerve to say that I am acting crazy. Watch casino, thinking I can't trust my baby mama, so I stay up in the trap. Yeah, I got low numbers. In my trap house, we got shooters at the door. I can show you some shit that you ain't never seen before. Can't compare our prices, nigga. Everything for the low. Just a microwave, illegal water, ain't no stove. Couple couches, ain't no bed. I've been in the same clothes, the same fuck, sitting in the same damn bowl. Looked out on the window, everything must be sold. Going platinum out my trap, motherfucker, going gold.
I got traps, I got shooters, I got young niggas ready to do you. Selling pieces that strong, and I smoke that shit back to back like hookah. 45 on my waistline. Girl, fuck nigga tryna take mine. It's gangsta shit where I'm from, nigga smoke your ass in the broad daytime. Sitting in my trap house at the kitchen table. What you want, what you tryna get? How much you got, what you tryna spend? In these streets, nigga, it ain't no friend. I cannot trust another nigga when I can barely trust my own kid. 100 rounds and 50 rounds. Just call and place me another order for 50 pounds. I'm chilling at my trap house. No stove, one couch, Ziploc bags and scales. On my prepaid making sales. Dope boy here, nigga, you can tell.
In my trap house, we got shooters at the door. I can show you some shit that you ain't never seen before. Can't compare our prices, nigga. Everything for the low. Just a microwave, illegal water, ain't no stove. Couple couches, ain't no bed. I've been in the same clothes, the same fuck, sitting in the same damn bowl. Looked out on the window, everything must be sold. Going platinum out my trap, motherfucker, going gold.
What is Optimum's greatest offer of all time? Introducing Optimum Complete. Combine fast fiber internet and 5G mobile for as low as $45 a month. Call, click, or visit a store today. Get closer, go farther with Optimum.
Ay. Ay. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, hey.
Where I'm from, the slums. These niggas know how I come. Say extra clips with a Drake and the Drizzon. Nigga asking me, is it smoke? Bitch, get some. I don't pick and choose when it come to bearing these arms. I don't pick and choose with no op if it's Sam. I don't pick and choose, put no hoe over my man. I don't pick and choose with no snitch, he took the stand. I don't pick and choose with the stick, it ain't gon' jam. I'm coming from a spot where I gotta beat the odds. Where love ain't real until a nigga take the charge. Where niggas they kill you if you don't play your part. Where trust get you smoke, they won't find you to the mall. A nigga out here hustling, thugging, busting. A nigga ran up on me, had to put him in a concussion. Niggas that I used to love, now I just say fuck 'em. I really had the moments where a nigga just miss my brothers. I'm tired of talking too much, barking shots get to sparking. Niggas shake my hand behind my back, they pillow talking. They was on some dick, now they acting like it's some problems. Hoes out here fucking for some pennies, you want some coppers? Niggas falling out around this bitch behind some goblins. She ate a nigga dick off Patron and the rocks. How you love a nigga but don't wanna see him shining? Niggas really bitches, I ain't giving no consignments. Where I'm from, the slums. These niggas know how I come. Say extra clips with a Drake and the Drizzon. Nigga asking me, is it smoke? Bitch, get some. I don't pick and choose when it come to bearing these arms. I don't pick and choose with no op if it's Sam. I don't pick and choose, put no hoe over my man. I don't pick and choose with no snitch, he took the stand. I don't pick and choose with the stick, it ain't gon' jam.
Gotta let that beat be. Or should I just come right in? I think I'm gonna come right in.
Let me gon' get right. Ain't nobody out here fucking with me. Need a PYT to double up with my other freak. Quarter piece on fleek. Get her white toes done 2 times a week. She's control freak. She's a beast. She don't like the sheets. Like to watch herself in the mirror when she getting crazy. Looking down at the people when we on the 19th. Had to swap that North Face out and put on some double B. Last nigga bleached a purse. I swapped out with double G. And the Smoky Mountains up in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I kinda like the spots when we ducked off MB Soda Street. Smoking dose-it dough. I done dropped the cherry on my clothes. $1,000 sweater. I done fucked up, can't even rock no more. Bunch of whole dope on her once, now she do the most. Blowing up my phone, got my bitch tripping all at home. Call me Little Kevin, I can hit you when I get along. Got this player shit from my daddy, he a Rolling Stone. Know these niggas wanna be like me, but I can't be cloned. She just wanna hang, got her breaking down stuff in cones. Meanwhile, I got my daily right here on the other line. Gotta play for 9, fuck it, I'ma charge them 14.5. Gonna run it back, throw that shit down on a new plaque. Diamonds all in that, wrap the Cuba link around my neck. Just like my bitch, know these diamonds on a nigga wet. Straight up out the trenches, I got hitters sliding off the wet. So just slide for free, what I look like paying a dope in that. All these niggas 12, putting that police shit all on the net. I can never listen to some niggas who will team some rats. Niggas going broke, trying to do the shit, we did them facts. Lock a nigga top, lock, now his shit a mess. We gon' hit the block, 2 blocks, leave a nigga stretch. Nigga try to run the game on me, nigga give me that. Hit the bowl, lost a couple hundred on a roulette bet. Niggas got my name in they mouth just like they whole neck. Niggas still staying with they mama, I will cocktail that. And be outside with an AR right on top of that. How you beefing with me, little nigga? You ain't pop shit, my nigga. He just wanna prove himself, he a high head. He just wanna shoot the honey bun, I just bought him. Bought a new crib just to fucking sell loud in. Got your bitch breaking down them bowls, it ain't private. My little nigga put
build like that. You know what I'm saying? Talk your shit like that, real shit like that. Talk that shit, nigga. Talk that shit. My posse private, no greedy shit, we all fit. Yeah, my posse private, no greedy shit, we all fit. Yeah, my posse private, no greedy shit, we all fit. My posse private, no greedy shit, we all fit. Nigga. Whole team, nigga. Let that beat feel like that. Yeah. Talk our shit and we through. Go, go.
Times between 343 and 352.
Okay, so let's go over here, and what's this mean?
The same thing. All these cell sites that are shown are from the protocol measurement data from Sprint's engineering reports, and those towers in that sector on that tower saw the phone at whatever times it indicated.
Do you know the difference from this point to this point?
I'd imagine it's a couple miles.
So from this report, we're showing that there's a couple miles difference, but the phone is pinging over here at 349, but according to your report, between 343 and 352, it's pinging here. And what does this one mean right here?
348.
So it's pinging from this tower at 348.
That tower saw the phone, yes.
All right, and then down here?
350.
So again, back here, between 343 to 352, it was pinging off of this tower. But at 350, it was down here.
No. The phone wasn't down there. It wasn't up here. The phone wasn't in any of those places. That's not what the data says. The data is saying that these towers at those times saw the phone. This is all from the engineering reports, which means that the towers, these towers that see them, are not necessarily the tower with the clearest, strongest signal. It's not necessarily the serving cell that saw it. If we had distance information at these times, we'd see like a band, just like we did on the T-Mobile record. So for instance, at this one, 349, we'd see a distance, whether it was a number like this or like this, whatever. The distance column on that engineering report for all these data points was blank. We don't have distance. So we know that these towers saw the phone. And we know that they were not necessarily the serving cell. It could have been. Any one of them could have been, but we don't know that. And we don't have any calls on the call detail records to cross-check and say, okay, well, which tower did the phone reach out to when it needed to be called? So we're left to the question then is, well, what's this mean? Because as you were just asking, as we were just talking about, 349 falls between 343 and 352. How could two towers in two completely different areas both see the phone? Well, they both did see the phone at different times because they registered that connection with the phone. So if you ask me what's my opinion, what's that mean? It's like, well, the phone was someplace where all these towers could see it. And I note that this one is pointed generally west, this one's pointed west-southwest, this one's pointed southeast, this is northeast, this is this way. So my conclusion would be that this data, which it's hard to form a conclusion from because you don't have I don't have the distance information I want. It's not going to say, okay, the phone is, generally it's in Miramar. We know that, right? It's not in Fort Lauderdale or Miami. It's probably somewhere in the middle of all these towers. So if I'm asked a specific question, like, hey, is this consistent with the phone being in Silver Lakes? I would say yes. Is it consistent with the phone being in McDonald's? Yes. I mean, this is at a...
So it could be anywhere in Miramar, basically.
I don't think it could be anywhere in Miramar. I think it could be anywhere kind of in this map area. I think it's a fair statement.
Okay. At any given time as well, correct? Because I just for the sake of my knowledge, when we look at this item that says 343 to 352, so I know it's hitting that tower throughout that time, right? But it's then also hitting this other tower at the exact same time, and 30 seconds it's hitting this other tower. Is that a fair statement?
The network's hitting the phone. The phone isn't hitting the network, but yes.
Okay, and then how far can a phone go? Is it 1 mile? Could it be between 1 mile and 20 miles? Or could a phone ping off a tower that's 50 miles away? Do you have any background on that?
Yeah, so it depends kind of what you're asking. If you're asking how far away can a phone be from a tower when it makes a call, well, that depends. If you're asking how far away can a tower see a phone, which is a different thing, because the phone choosing the tower is going to rely on the phone's clear, strong signal, and that also depends. Generally, I see something in the range of like a couple miles, but I've seen in extreme cases many miles that a tower can see a phone.
Okay. So even with this is again based on that.
Yep.
Any area it could be in and just ping.
To try and make a conclusion about a precise location for a phone on this data is I don't think possible based on this data.
So wouldn't it be more accurate just to show a range of where it could be at rather than trying to do these curves and pinpoint the precision?
What do you mean?
I mean, you would agree with me that there are some unknowns. Even though we're talking about the speed of light static, we don't know what T-Mobile's using. Are they rounding up to the 3, or are they actually keeping the right number, correct?
Well, regardless of what they're doing, they're giving us a distance, and that's the distance that's plotted. So we plot the distance, applying the records that T-Mobile gave us, not saying, okay, the phone's here in this bubble or something like that. We're saying, hey, this is what the records show.
Well, it seems like you're giving testimony that it's precise, but when we get through the data, how it's used, that it's actually really just an estimate. So is it precise, or is this an estimate that you're giving us?
I guess it's not an estimate like just some number that's made up, just a ballpark, hey, out of 10,000 or something like that. Yeah. But if you're asking, I think you're asking about really the accuracy, not the precision, because that number, like if the number is 0.54 miles, that's a precise number, right? That's down to the hundredths of a mile. You're asking how accurate is that number? And we'll say, okay, generally that's accurate. And that's why with my testimony, even when I have a precise number like 0.54 miles from a tower, I still say, hey, it's consistent with it being at this location, where it's generally in the area of this apartment complex or something, because the possibility it may not be precisely there.
So based on that map, could it be possible that you had 2 phones registered to the same person on the same carrier being operated by 2 different people who were sitting next to each other? Can those 2 phones ping off different towers?
When you say ping off towers, you mean are you talking about the engineering report?
Yeah, the engineering report.
Could different towers see those phones?
Yeah, so
yes.
We're both sitting in the car here.
Yep.
Is it possible that it's pinging off to here and then the other person's phone is pinging here?
Yes.
While they're next to each other?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell if this phone's in somebody's pocket?
No.
Can you tell if it's left on the car seat?
No.
Can you tell if we've had the phone?
No.
Okay. No further questions?
Council, thank you.
Thank you.
You ready to redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You ready? You may proceed.
So in terms of, I want to make sure we're clear and it's very clear for the jury. What's the difference between the engineering report and the call detail report?
So the call detail records show what the phone was doing, like the phone's calls and texts. And they will list a tower and a sector in them. And that's the tower and the sector that the phone identified as the one that offers the clearest, strongest signals. That's the tower that the phone chose to connect to when it needed to make a call or send a text. That's the phone's perspective. The engineering report is the network's perspective, so different towers that may or may not be the serving cell could have seen the phone.
Why is it important to differentiate between those two?
Because, so if I'm plotting doing a report, and I plot the phone that was the serving, or the tower that was the serving cell, then I'm showing, okay, wherever the phone was in this coverage area, it saw this is the best tower, the strongest signal point. With the engineering report, like the slide we were just looking at, none of those may have been the best one. So if I'm looking at something that I plotted because of call detail records, I would infer that that's probably the tower that's the closest or the best line of sight. With the engineering data, that may not be the case.
Okay, and so in the one we were just talking about, that was under the 3717895. That phone, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if you can explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's discussion about the accuracy versus the precision of the records. Is this a precise estimate of which towers saw that phone?
Yes.
And how can you say that?
Because it listed, the records listed specific towers that saw the phone at a specific time.
Are you ever going to say, based on the data that you have here, precisely where that phone was?
No.
What conclusions can you draw from this map based on your training and experience?
That the phone is generally somewhere in the area shown on the map. In my opinion, it's likely to be in the center of the map here, because that's where the direction that the antennas on the towers that saw the phone are going.
So counsel asked you about the latitude and longitude columns that are on the call records from the engineering report.
Yes.
And so you mentioned that you do not validate these particular records.
Yes.
Could they be accurate?
They certainly could be accurate, yes.
Can you explain as to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you call 911, what does a cell phone provider send out to law enforcement?
At minimum, it has to provide the tower and sector codes.
All right. And at maximum, what can they provide?
I don't know.
In terms of those coordinates and things of that, is that also collected for the purposes of location for 911 emergency?
Maybe.
Okay. You said that, and counsel asked you a lot about validating your findings, your records, your analysis. When you are doing the training and experience, do you validate the records that are given to you by going out and finding a specific phone in the field?
Yes.
Okay. Would you be able to validate your records with other corroborating information?
Yes.
For example, a video. Would that help validate your records if the phone is seen in the video?
Yes.
Okay. If there is video or surveillance footage of locations and the phone is seen in that area, would that validate your information?
Yes.
Is, for example, on the cell phone records that have been placed in the mapping of the 772-713-9807 and going to the 248-9081, 4:40 to 4:52 a.m. If that phone is found at the Miramar Memorial Hospital, would that validate your findings?
Yes.
Is cell phone technology new?
No.
How long has it been around?
Decades.
Okay. The materials and things that you were relying upon, how long have those been used?
A long time. More than a decade.
In terms of the difference between the 2.99 and 3 to the 10th, what types of difference in distance are you looking at when you're making those tiny advance bands?
So, that's not a huge number, a huge difference between them, so that would be generally a small difference between the distance estimates there.
Are we talking meters or miles?
meters.
In terms of the distance, you said it's 39 meters plus or minus each direction from the center of that location.
Yes.
The specific location that's plotted is based on the location of the tower.
Yes.
Is the tower a known quantity?
Yes.
Does the tower move?
No. I mean, it can, but as a director, it's no.
With regards to publications and trainings and things of that nature that you rely upon, are you trained in this area?
Yes.
What types of resources and materials are you used during your training with the FBI CAST analysis?
Yeah, so instructors from Florida Institute of Technology who teach cellular theory and network engineering, network engineers from all the major service providers, other related fields, certain like manufacturers, the ecosystem, and then also we have a lot of peer instruction as well.
In terms of if a child is kidnapped in Miami, are they going to call an engineer to find them?
No, they'll probably call the police or the FBI.
Council asked and brought up a lot of things about the distance and the measurements in the records. Is it possible to go through the CDRs or in the instance of the Sprint, or for example, the engineering report on the 9807 phone number, and highlight instances of exactly where on your records it corresponds with the records as provided from T-Mobile?
Yeah, we could go through line by line and say, here's the map that I made, here's how the corresponding line in the T-Mobile report is.
And in terms of the records and things that were sent to you, were they forwarded with a T-Mobile email address attached to them?
Yeah, I got them on a thumb drive, and they had a certification from T-Mobile or Sprint or whatever.
In terms of, there's a lot of discussion, I want to make sure it's clear for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you were plotting some of these particular phones, specifically the Sprint ones, are you saying that these towers are the ones that would have been used if they were making a phone call?
No.
What are you saying?
These towers saw the phone.
Can you give any more indication on the direction or anything on that specific issue?
On the direction, you can see the side of the tower that saw the phone. But that's it.
Has this type of analysis been used to solve crimes?
Yes.
Has it been used to locate missing persons?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to object because this line of question is outside of my cross-examination.
Hey, overruled.
In terms of the data that you rely upon, has it been validated in your personal experience and training?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
This witness excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. Excuse me. Counsel, want to call your next witness?
Yes, Kurt Rhodes.
Good afternoon. Are you Kurt Rhodes?
Yes.
Welcome. Come on up. This is our witness stand here. When you get there, you can put your things down, remain standing, and raise your right hand. Be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you should give in this case should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your full legal name for the record.
Kurt Rhodes.
Please spell your first and last name for the court recording.
KURT RHODES.
Thank you so much.
Please have a seat. Rhodes, that microphone in front of you will adjust up or down, but it does not move back and forth, all right? Are you ready to proceed, sir?
Yes.
Counsel, you may.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Rhodes. How are you today?
I'm well, how are you?
Very well. Thank you for asking. Could you please introduce yourselves, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and tell them where you work?
My name is Kurt Rhodes. I am a DNA analyst. I work in the BSO Crime Laboratory as a DNA analyst.
And what are the qualifications to be an analyst in the BSO Crime Lab for DNA?
I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Forensic Science from the University of Central Florida. I have completed the Sheriff's Office training program for DNA analysts. I hold certification from the ABC for American Board of Criminalistics in molecular biology. And I am required to complete at least 8 hours of continuing education per year.
And so how long have you been employed for the Sheriff's Office?
I began in 2004 as a DNA technician. I went into DNA training in 2005 and began DNA casework in 2007.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what's the difference between a DNA technician, like you were in 2005, and when you transitioned to 2004, and transitioned to 2005 to be the DNA training?
As a technician, I would do instrument maintenance, quality control checks on the chemicals and reagents, do ordering, record keeping, things of that nature.
So you briefly mentioned a little bit of your educational background. What types of coursework and classes did you take when you were getting your initial degree in the sciences?
The program that I did through the UCF was the DNA-based program for forensic science. So there was genetics, molecular biology, biochemistry. There was a statistics course, mainly the coursework towards the end of the degree requirements were mainly geared towards genetics and biochemistry and molecular biology.
So do you have specialized training using statistics to interpret DNA?
I have completed the statistics in my college coursework, and I have attended courses throughout my career in the Sheriff's Office dealing with statistics and how they relate to DNA cases.
You mentioned that you're required to do 8 hours of continuing education. Is that on a yearly basis?
Yes, per year.
And approximately how many hours of continuing education have you completed since 2005 when you started your DNA training?
It's at least 8 hours. Some of the courses, use the term loosely, range from 8 hours to 40 hours. So 1 year maybe 8 hours, another year maybe 48 or even 60. It just depends on the year.
So in terms of the DNA section that you work for, what does it do on a day-to-day basis?
As a DNA analyst, I examine evidence that's submitted by investigators in an attempt to develop DNA profiles from question samples and ultimately compare them to known standards to see if the individual that is being investigated or even alleged victim would be included or excluded from the evidence that's submitted.
In terms of the DNA analysis, do you do that yourself, hands-on?
I do.
And the training that you started to talk about, you said you started training in 2005. Could you talk and explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that training entails?
It entailed readings, hands-on processing of the samples that we did, time, extraction methods, quantitations. There was written tests as well as a mock court. Then there was it ended with a competency test to ensure that I was able to process samples appropriately, and then I was allowed to do supervised casework and then finally independent casework.
So let's explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what is a competency test?
A competency test is given to an analyst after they have completed a training program for whatever subject. It could be as simple as an extraction method or maybe a quantitation method. So the laboratory will then provide a test that the analyst would conduct. It would process this test and return the results to the agency to see if the results that they've gotten were appropriate for what was doing.
And do you have to pass these competency tests or examinations before moving on to the next steps?
The competency tests are done to ensure that you are competent in the technology that is going to be employed in the casework.
So once you pass in terms of the scoring and completion of that proficiency testing twice a year?
I process it in-house, it's reviewed, and then it's sent back to the test provider.
Does the proficiency test require and include statistical interpretations?
They do.
And has the statistical interpretations changed as the way they've been doing in the field of DNA over the last couple of years?
In my laboratory, yes. It went from statistical calculation with known as random match probabilities, single source samples, and CPIs, which were combined probability of inclusion. We've transitioned from those two methods to a likelihood ratio method.
And can you explain, in as simple of terms as possible, what is a likelihood ratio?
A likelihood ratio is a comparison of two hypotheses. Hypothesis 1 compared against hypothesis 2. In terms of casework analysis, the initial hypothesis is that a person is included as a contributor to a sample, and the competing hypothesis is that the evidence or the DNA profile is coming from an unrelated unknown individual. So that is how the likelihood ratio is set up. Person 1 or person of interest is the contributor to the evidence versus it's coming from an unknown, unrelated individual.
Okay. So I want to go back, and so can you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you're doing a DNA analysis, what is it that you're looking for?
For the analysis that I'm doing, I am processing for STRs, or short tandem repeats. These are small fragments of DNA that are located in our DNA genome. They repeat a certain number of times. When I first began DNA casework, I was processing 15 STRs plus the amelogenin or sex-determining marker, and now the technology has gone to 24 STRs.
So when you say short tandem repeat or STRs, do they code for something like eye color or hair color?
These are non-coding fragments of DNA.
Why is it important to look at those areas as opposed to eye color?
The locations that we're testing, or that I'm testing for, the locations that I'm processing, they're robust. They're polymorphic, meaning that there are differences. There's not just 1 or 2 variations. There could be 10 to 12 different variations, and they are independent from each other, meaning that the result that I get at location 1 will not affect the result that I would get at location 2, or the DNA profile at location 1 isn't affected by the DNA profile of location 2.
Is that a genetic marker? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And just so it's clear, can you define exactly what a genetic marker is from the DNA analyst perspective?
As it relates to what I do, it is the STL, or the short tandem. That is the specific DNA fragment or DNA marker that I'm processing or testing for.
Can you explain what an allele is?
The allele is the genetic trait or characteristic. In terms of STRs, as I mentioned, they're short fragments of DNA that repeat. So they're measured in numbers. At location, I'm just going to say location 1, an allele or characteristic of gene may be a 7.
or an 8, or a 9, or an 11. So a DNA profile that I generate is actually just a series of numbers based off of the alleles or traits that I obtain at each DNA location.
You said they're identified by numbers. What does that mean? Could you explain like where the numbers, what do you say? Is it 274? Is it 11?
As I mentioned, the 7, 8, or 9, that refers to the number of repeats. So with the STRs, it's a repeated fragment of DNA, ATCG, and that ATCG may repeat a certain number of times. It may repeat 7 times, or 8 times, or 9 times. And so that is what those numbers that I'm expressing represent.
And where does that repeat? How does that show up in a person's individual DNA?
It is located on the DNA chromosome.
And what determines what makes up an individual's DNA chromosome?
In the case of humans, our DNA is inherited from our parents. We receive half of our DNA from our mother and half from our father. And with the exception of identical twins, no two individuals are going to share the exact same DNA.
In terms of your casework and the DNA process that you do, has that been validated?
It has.
Is the Broward Sheriff's Office Crime Lab accredited?
It is.
And by what outside accredited body?
We're accredited by ANAB, or the ANSI National Accreditation Board.
What's the purpose of maintaining an accreditation as a lab?
The accreditation is a voluntary process. The accrediting board will do an audit on our laboratory. It will check our SOPs, or standard operating procedures, to ensure that we are doing proper record keeping, we are following the procedures that we have in place, and that the laboratory is essentially running as it is supposed to be according to the SOPs.
And in terms of the specific areas in which the lab is accredited for, are you only talking on DNA?
It's accredited in 4 different sections: DNA, firearms, chemistry, and fingerprints.
Have you worked in any of those other sections?
I have not.
In terms of the proficiency testing that we talked about earlier, is that also part of the accreditation process?
Yes. Everything that is done in the laboratory will be audited through the accrediting body.
And is there also accreditation?
What y'all think, man? I think he good. I think they go cook his.
Again, it's part of the audit.
You mentioned that you used to do 15 areas plus Amylogen, and now you're at 24 areas. Can you explain what made that change occur?
The DNA analysis is a science, and as the years go on, the science advances. So the companies that provide these commercial kits are able to make combinations of these STRs in a bigger multiplex, that's what it's identified as, to analyze more DNA locations all at once in order to provide a better picture compared to years prior when it may have only been 9 locations.
With regards to the locations, does the software take into account the frequency then, or the number of times a particular repeat is found in a population?
I'm not sure of your question.
And previously, when you were doing random population, random match, or CPI, is it important to know how frequently a specific allele was shown up in a population of individuals?
Yes. At the end of the analysis, if I am, let me start over again. After I look at the evidentiary samples, I'll determine if it's a single source profile or a mixture, and then do a comparison to a known standard. If I am going to report that the known standard is included as a contributor, I am required to give a weight to this. And in order to give a weight to this match or inclusion, I am required to provide a statistical calculation. So years prior, as I mentioned, it was RMP or CPI. We've gone to glycolates now. But all of those different calculations or those statistics are based on allele frequencies. And what that means is those STR markers that I mentioned before occur in the population at different frequencies. So I mentioned allele 8 may occur at a frequency of 25% of the population has it. And allele 7 may occur at 15%. So when I do a statistical calculation with all of the alleles present in the DNA profile compared to the standard, all of those frequencies are used to calculate the end result, whether it's an LR, a CPI, or an RNP.
So while you change your method, you're still using a lot of the same and building on the same items that you've used in the past?
Yes, that's right.
Has the likelihood ratio, LR, been validated for statistical analysis?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about how in the lab you prevent any sort of cross-contamination?
When I process evidence, I am processing one case at a time, and when I refer to that, screening evidence. So the initial step is to look at the evidence that I am receiving from our central evidence supply to ensure that the seals were intact. I'll do an inventory of the evidence compared to the submission form and property receipts. Typically, the items are packaged all together, kind of like a big brown bag. I'll open that bag up and do an inventory. And then again, process one evidentiary sample at a time while leaving the other samples in a drawer or a cabinet.
What do you do in between each sample to your workstation?
And the workstation is cleaned with bleach and alcohol. As I'm doing my screening, I do wear a lab coat, gloves. I work in what's called a dead air box, a big plexiglass box about the size of this bench here. And I do all my processing on the bench. I'll clean that up after I'm done with the evidence, change my gloves, and then move on to the next piece of evidence. When the next step will be extraction, which would be after I've taken my sample and my cutting of this evidence, I place it into a tube and try and elute out or purify any DNA present that's on that sample. At that point, I'm working little test tubes. So I would again be changing gloves, wearing a lab coat, a mask, and I would only be working with one sample at a time, or only open it one sample at a time to avoid sample contamination.
In terms of, you mentioned the test tubes, are those sealed?
Yes.
So you talked about how you get evidence and it's brought to you. Does the lab assign a specific case number at the lab to track all items of evidence and samples?
Yes. When the investigator brings the evidence to the evidence window or the central receiving, there's a property receipt in the submission form that's brought in, accepted by the evidence intake unit, and it is given a laboratory number.
When you receive evidence, you mentioned you check the seals. Why do you do that?
I check the seals. It's an indication if the evidence has been tampered with. There is a chain of custody form with property receipt, and it lists who had custody of the evidence, and then from which person to which person it's transferred to.
And where is the evidence stored before you go and retrieve it?
For the most times, it is stored in the evidence vault. There's some cases where the evidence intake unit keeps it up front in their area, in the safe. But the majority of times, they have an evidence vault in which I go to retrieve the evidence.
So we've talked a lot about DNA and kind of the process leading up to that. What about serology? Is that a part of your job as well?
Serology is one of the first steps that I do when screening the evidence. With each case that's submitted, there's an evidence submission form. It gives me an idea of the type of evidence that I'm going to be processing. Sexual assaults. Years prior, I would screen for semen, looking for sperm cells. Maybe the case has indications of blood, at which point I would do presumptive testing for blood. Items of evidence are submitted where the investigator is just looking for what's essentially called contact DNA, where an individual had come into contact with maybe an item left at the scene. There's no real serology to do on that one, but I would just take cuttings of the samples.
So, Mr. Rhodes, I want to make sure it's clear. Is it your job to go out and collect DNA evidence?
No, I do not do any of the collection. The evidence is submitted and I retrieve it from the evidence fund.
Do you give any advice on where to collect evidence from?
I do not.
Have you ever been any training in crime scene or evidence collection?
I have.
In terms of your employment at the sheriff's office, have you ever worked outside of the forensic DNA section?
I have not.
How many times approximately have you done the DNA analysis process we're going to talk about?
I was processing about 100 cases per year. I would say roughly 2 to 3 samples per case, so maybe 200 to 300 samples per year for a good 10 years. So thousands of samples in processing.
And in that time, have you had the opportunity to testify in court?
I testified in Broward County about 40 times, and in the federal district 3 times.
You're offered to defense for law matter?
No need. No objection.
Proceed, Justice.
Okay, so I want to start with, in this particular case, did you do DNA analysis?
I did.
Could you please describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the step-by-step process you go through? You started talking a little bit about extraction. You could pick up there and continue.
So again, the first step would be a screening of the evidence to collect my samples, which I would then put in 2 small, essentially test tubes, little microcentrifuge tubes. I would add reagents or chemicals to the tube in order to elute out any potential DNA that's present on the sample and to purify any DNA that may be present in that cutting.
Should we approach for just one moment?
Yes. Discuss the case, don't form any opinion about the case, don't allow anyone to discuss the case in the presence of person, no research, just leave your note page on your shirt. Thank you. Thank you. Let the record reflect the jury step down. Counsel remain along with the defendant. Our witness remains on the stand. Is everything all right?
Yeah, we just need a moment.
Okay. You need a restroom break, Mr. Devins? Yes? Can we arrange that for Mr. Devins, please? Yes, sir. All right, we'll be in recess. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could tell the witness why we're taking a break. They were being loud.
We're in recess.
I objected. They're telling me.
Why is that?
I said no.
Oh, I thought you.
No, I said no.
Coming back to the Law and Crime Network, YNW Melly. The prosecution says he's a double murderer. His trial is going on right now, and on the stand for the prosecution is a DNA analyst. His name is Kurt Rhodes. Let's go into court and listen.
Several years.
In my laboratory, yes. It went from statistical calculation with known as random match probabilities, single source samples, and CPIs, which
terms as possible, what is a likelihood ratio?
Likelihood ratio is a comparison of two hypotheses. Hypothesis 1 compared against hypothesis 2. In terms of casework analysis, the initial hypothesis is that a person is included as a contributor to a sample, and the competing hypothesis is that the evidence or the DNA profile is coming from an unrelated unknown individual. So that is how the likelihood ratio is set up. Person 1 or a person of interest is the contributor to the evidence versus it's coming from an unknown, unrelated individual.
Okay. So I want to go back, and so can you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you're doing a DNA analysis, what is it that you're looking for?
For the analysis that I'm doing, I am processing for STRs, or short tandem repeats. These are small fragments of DNA that are located in our DNA genome. They repeat a certain number of times. When I first began DNA casework, I was processing 15 STRs plus the amelogenin or sex-determining marker, and now the technology has gone to 24 STRs.
So when you say short tandem repeat or STRs, do they code for something like eye color or hair color?
These are non-coding fragments of DNA.
Why is it important to look at those areas as opposed to eye color?
The locations that we're testing, or that I'm testing for, the locations that I'm processing, they're robust. They're polymorphic, meaning that there are differences. There's not just 1 or 2 variations. There could be 10 to 12 different variations, and they are independent from each other, meaning that the result that I get at location 1 will not affect the result that I would get at location 2, or the DNA profile at location 1 isn't affected by the DNA profile of location 2.
Is that a genetic marker? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And just so it's clear, can you define exactly what a genetic marker is from the DNA analyst perspective?
As it relates to what I do, it is the STL, or the short tandem repeat. That is the specific DNA fragment or DNA marker that I'm processing or testing for.
Can you explain what an allele is?
The allele is the genetic trait or characteristic. In terms of STRs, as I mentioned, they're short fragments of DNA that repeat. So they're measured in numbers at location. I'm just going to say location 1. An allele or characteristic of gene may be a 7, or an 8, or a 9, or an 11. So a DNA profile that I generate is actually just a series of numbers based off of the alleles or traits that I obtain at each DNA location.
You said they're identified by numbers. What does that mean? Could you explain where the numbers, what do you say? Is it 274? Is it 11?
As I mentioned, the 7, 8, or 9, that refers to the number of repeats. So with the STRs, it's a repeated fragment of DNA, ATCG, and that ATCG may repeat a certain number of times. It may repeat 7 times, or 8 times, or 9 times. And so that is what those numbers that I'm expressing represent.
And where does that repeats, how does that show up in a person's individual DNA?
It is located on the DNA chromosome.
And what determines what makes up an individual's DNA chromosome?
In the case of humans, our DNA is inherited from our parents. We receive half of our DNA from our mother and half from our father. And with the exception of identical twins, no two individuals are going to share the exact same DNA.
In terms of your casework and the DNA process that you do, has that been validated?
It has.
Is the Broward Sheriff's Office Crime Lab accredited?
It is.
And by what outside accredited body?
We're accredited by ANAB, or the ANSI National Accreditation Board.
What's the purpose of maintaining an accreditation as a lab?
The accreditation is a voluntary process. The accrediting board will do an audit on our laboratory. It will check our SOPs, or standard operating procedures, to ensure that we are doing proper record keeping, we are following the procedures that we have in place, and that the laboratory is essentially running as it is supposed to be according to the SOPs.
And in terms of the specific areas in which the lab is accredited for, are you only talking on DNA?
It's accredited in 4 different sections: DNA, firearms, chemistry, and fingerprints.
Have you worked in any of those other sections?
I have not.
In terms of the proficiency testing that we talked about earlier, is that also part of the accreditation process?
Yes, everything that is done in the laboratory will be audited through the accrediting body.
And is there also accreditation and validation in terms of statistics that are used?
Again, it's part of the audits.
You mentioned that you used to do 15 areas plus Amylogen, and now you're at 24 areas. Can you explain what made that change occur?
The DNA analysis is a science, and as the years go on, the science advances. So the companies that provide these commercial kits are able to make combinations of these STRs in a bigger multiplex. That's what it's identified as.
Prosecution hasn't gotten to the substance of the DNA yet. That gives us time to take a quick break here at the Law and Crime Network. Stay tuned. On the other side, Y&W Melly and our own Terry Austin, who's been in that courtroom today. Stay with us.
Electrolyte Instant Hydration.
I think this one didn't cook. You know, early.
Yeah, nigga, I got the wall, nigga. Come on. Yeah, nigga. Yeah, nigga. Get in the box, nigga. What's up? What's up, nigga? What's up? Shoot.
Oh, come here. Fuck you talking about?
Okay.
I do this shit.
I'm back on it. I'm back. Oh shit. I'm back on it. Hey, back up, bro. Who the fuck is you? So we D you out. What's up?
I'm watching.
Oh,
Watch out,
yeah.
gang.
Oh,
Watch
yeah.
out, gang.
Got him.
Hey, bro, don't steal on me,
bro. Got him where we want him. Got him where we want him.
I just can't get some med kits.
But y'all better fuck up, man.
Bro, watch out, gang.
Sneak specialist.
Them niggas at my job are telling me watch out.
Nigga. Yeah, nigga. Yeah, nigga. I ain't even gonna do you like that. I ain't even gonna kill you. And back up, bro. You fucking non-factor. You fucking weird ass nigga. Back up. Corny ass.
I got
nigga.
you, Brody.
Good looking,
You
fool.
got me, bro. You dick eating ass nigga.
Hey, gang, come here, gang. Yo.
What?
Hey, come here, gang.
What's up, bro? What's up, little bro?
Let me holler at you. Come here, bro.
What's the word, fool?
What? Fuck niggas talking about in this bitch. What up? What wanna do?
Okay, bitch.
Okay.
Fuck wrong with you?
Okay. Hey, I can talk to you, buddy.
Hey, Doc, let me get a band-aid right quick, gang.
Where the fuck he at?
Damn.
Bro, why bitch ass niggas keep putting their hands on me, dude? Yeah, I just gave this dude a band-aid,
Hey, bro, I need to holler at you real quick, gang. How'd you get this band-aid, bro?
Who's need to holler at me about, fool?
I wanna know why we on bad terms, bro. Why I gotta keep killing you and shit, bro.
Who is you, gang?
I'm trying to take a break, bro. I need to lay back, bro. My feet hurt, bro.
What gang is you? Come holler at me. Let's chop it up. Come here. Bro, where my band-aid at, Doc?
Yeah, bro, you gave that shit to
Bro,
me,
let me give you a band-aid, gang. Let me get you right.
Y'all niggas tripping up here, bro. Get this shit together, dude.
Hey, chill out, gang.
You scared me. That just had my heart drop. You saw that, right?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm on that. I'm on that.
Let me get you right, stitch you up right quick, man.
And Mr. Wanzo, man, you being so mean, man.
Yeah,
Who you
man.
talking to, dude?
Goddamn. He talking to you, Wanzo Judy.
Real cool,
God.
man. You a meanie. Oh,
Who you punching, gang?
Come outside. Come outside,
Okay,
dude.
you booted, gang. You
Come
booted.
outside, bro.
I ain't fight you.
Hey, you the sergeant? You the sergeant? Stop, bro. Stop, bro.
Bitch ass niggas, stop making niggas, nigga. Oh shit, bitch ass nigga trying to make me, gang.
Stop blowing it up. Hey, look, come here, folks.
What's that
Let me
word?
Get your line, bro. I'm gonna chop it up with you, bro.
Holla at me, gang. What's up, bro?
What's up, bro? I'm tired of putting belt to ass, bro. I ain't gonna lie.
Nigga, who asked you putting belt to?
Bro,
Don't move, gang.
What you up?
What you up for, gang? No, I'm one of them, gang. I'm really him, gang.
I can talk to you, buddy. I can talk to you.
Fuck grown niggas around this bitch, man. Stop playing like that, man. What's up, buddy?
Hey, buddy, I'm new to the city. You got y'all a little bad gang?
Hold on, Jermaine.
They on the way, nigga. They on the way, nigga. They on the way, gang. I'm finna hold this quarter to get busy.
Say less. Let's do it.
Cool.
Hey, where your pipe at, boy? You want to talk to me? You better get busy, boy.
Oh, got it right now. Hey. Say, drop me some 5 central, quick, bro.
Here, grab this gun, bro, and get busy when the police come, gang.
Could you
Watch out,
some
look at
notes
really
for
quick.
that?
Watch out, gang.
Down too fast for
Oh no, they was like forward.
You ready?
One in the room.
While we're waiting, I want to say that the BSO officers that are in this courtroom have been very cooperative.
We ain't got to smoke that yet. I just want to go to the
Cool.
I dropped the cop door at the top of the stairs.
You ain't hit which one? The one in the blue?
Oh,
don't
hit
hit his head. Don't hit his head. Oh yeah.
Oh,
you talking about the
AC.
Yeah.
Okay, put that bitch ass right here too.
Yeah, that's his ass. So why he tired of putting belt?
Lift it.
Keep putting belt, bitch ass boy.
This
What you hit
side.
nigga with? You hit him with the scarf?
Hit his ass with 4 niggas.
Yo. What the fuck?
Hey, a cop got dropped trying to lock y'all niggas up, right? Yeah, niggas, big zone.
What's up?
Hey, get me out of these cups, Joe.
Hey, Brody, charge me
I'm pulling the AR out. Hey, recruit.
No problem. Hey, don't lift the ass up.
Hey, recruit, bro.
Grab me.
Hey, recruit, take your head off. I'm trying to see your head right quick. I heard they hit you on your shit with big ass 4 nicks.
I understand counsel demonstrative.
Yes, sir. I showed it to defense counsel.
I ain't gonna lie, dude spray that. Oh, yeah, I'm knocking this bitch ass out. Bitch, what you spraying that mace for, nigga?
Come on, gang. I'm good, gang. I'm good.
You'll give that instruction on demonstrative evidence.
Want me to spray him?
Yes.
No, not right now. Hey, Career, what's your line, little bro?
This nigga too hilarious.
My eyes. What's your name, buddy?
Drop your shit, nigga. My shit winds up.
Oh my god. Tighten up, bro. Get the fuck up, nigga.
Alright,
You heard him. I only got one eye left. What the fuck? Oh my god, what a nigga must be shit. Well, I can't see still.
Bro, this shit is crazy, bro.
That shit hurt than the motherfucker too. No milk, no water. Oh yeah, we good.
Bro, why you ain't help niggas, bro?
Hey, Draco, drop me a vegetable again. They blowing that bitch too. Hey,
You're entering.
Where?
Yeah, right there. He right there.
Where?
Grab that. I got 60 seconds. I'm about to run. I'm about to get on his ass. I got 60 seconds.
I'm following you, gang.
Right here, follow me. He running down. He running.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, he's on.
Oh my god. Oh. They just left dude ass at Integrity Building.
Yes.
Once again, reflect the presentation of the jury. Defendants, counsel, the assistant attorney, or witness remains on stand. And when it's broke, I think counsel.
Damn, it's going down.
Continue with your direct examination.
Hey, buddy. Hey, bro.
You may proceed.
A nigga with that same color flag, I think did something to me, gang. So I should beat the fuck out you, right?
Hey, beat that nigga. Beat that nigga. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Extraction is when I'm trying to even out the present in the sample taken together. The next step would be quantitation.
What's wrong with that nigga, gang? Fuck wrong with that nigga, boy?
Oh, this specific.
Oh, watch out. I ain't getting hit again with that shit. No, hell no, gang. We gotta fuck him up, though. Hey, look, we all gotta fuck him up, gang.
Targeting those short 10 repeats through the process of PCR, or polymerase chain reaction. In order to make a detectable amount of DNA.
Let me get some.
Beat this nigga ass, gang. Beat his ass, gang. Watch out. Check him, bro.
Hey, check his ass. Don't let that nigga get up.
So I'm gonna go back.
Oh yeah. Fuck wrong with you, nigga.
Kill that bitch ass nigga.
Fuck wrong with you, all ass nigga.
It's simply there to make a amount.
What you want to get your ass beat to, nigga?
Beat no shit around this bitch, no cap.
You say yo what?
This is the same
We
shit
did no
we
shit
got
like the
in
last day
trouble
of school
for,
like
though.
this bitch. Isn't that true? No cap.
That's been for several decades. It's used in mass disaster identifications, paternity testing.
Hey, we gotta get on Cash Family too, gang.
Come on.
On that with us about that one time.
I know where that all be too.
Come on.
Again, it's been decades. STRs came around.
Hey, let me. Who is this?
Three.
Red. Okay, bet. Let me grab this nigga Jameer. Back up. Oh, hold on. Who that? I ain't going for none of that, nigga.
Can you explain how DNA comes to be in
Hey, somebody just did that. Come here right quick, gang. Come here, Jameer.
You receive half from your mother, half from your father. The woman has the egg and the man.
Rhea, we need a photo, gang. Unlike this bitch, bro.
That's Lil Reed?
Each of those cells
What's shaking, bro? What's on?
Rhea, we need a photo, brother. Grab a photo.
So, is it always the first allele in any allele pair always comes from mom, and the second one always comes from dad?
I know that crib at.
So the way that
I know that little hideout.
is the smallest allele, remember.
Yeah, we need to go get on that, gang.
You would only know which allele.
You know they got the little what's it called too, the little shop up there too. Yeah, they posted up there too.
Yeah, we need to call it. Threaten the motherfucker. Grab a photo out, Reed.
What she said?
Some you about to fuck around now, you about to find out. Come about that shit we did, that gun stuff. Yeah, it's like our little people trying and shit.
You mad about that?
I don't know,
In
man.
terms of
Fuck it though.
your
That's some
DNA
little shit though, cause that's a little nigga. It shouldn't even be taken, you know.
Nah, for real though. This bitch look good though, don't it, gang?
Boy, I ain't gonna lie, that bitch raw, gang. Yeah.
This bitch a slider?
with regards
pistol, I
to
think.
Whistle was a pistol.
a sibling, if we thought a sibling was involved.
Fuck,
Is
I'm
that
jumping out,
something you
building
could
out
tell from
to
the
it.
data?
What?
There is.
Look, hey, look, all them cash family niggas work at the gun store too, all of them.
Hey, work at the gun. Pull up at that bitch. Pull up at that bitch. Pull up at that
Just
motherfucker.
comes across a case where there is the potential that there could be a sibling. That information can be related to the investigator.
And I want to talk about, so it's clear, what is
They work
a
here, someone work
standard
at mirrors.
when it comes to
Someone
DNA?
work at,
A standard is a sample.
You wanna run through that bitch?
Hell yeah. Niggas got chains on. We about to take
Early
this.
on, the purpose of my analysis is to compare evidentiary or question samples collected at an alleged crime scene to a known standard or to a known person to see if that person is included or excluded as a contributor to any DNA left, again, at the potential scene.
In terms of how you're expressing your conclusion, are you
Oh, see that funny ass light up track walk too.
more likely
You gonna light that bitch
Oh,
up
yeah,
for real.
black and red one.
There's some,
Yo, that nigga Johnny got that one track.
Well, I head tap Cam ass off that motherfucker, boy.
You did?
Hell yeah, at the gun store.
The evidentiary sample is X times more likely to
Put on her trapping on the block.
from the person of interest than if it had originated from
Rex, stop dancing and get on point, bro. What's up with bro?
Get on point.
Bro, that bitch Dougie and it's busting out here.
Tell his ass grab a glizzy, get alert.
Man, what?
What?
Bro, that bitch hit the Dougie while it's going down.
Is that
pull up his ass with a tsunami special?
Hey, tell me what? Yeah.
Why is
It's
that?
for Mr. Tsunami. Y'all
Niggas be fucked up about that shit right there, boy.
What? That tsunami special?
That motherfucker have a nigga heated it like a motherfucker, boy.
Oh my god, dog. Let a nigga have that bag on him.
Niggas a lot. Everything, dirty money.
When you say separately,
all that gone.
Separate workstations, separate
Stick and
funds,
promotion.
you can find that to the inventory as to what you do to separate them.
They too, they be all
I
down
will
here.
process the
Bro ass really out there dancing, gang, like it ain't, like niggas ain't right around this bitch on that.
What?
All they gotta do is hang out the window, because they wasn't just on point when we rolled past, Reed.
Extracted, amplified, and put on the instrument together.
Hey, me and Jameer was just up at Pew beating on shit, knocking niggas the fuck out, gang.
What?
I'm talking about police.
You ever see the nigga knock a nigga head off with hands, nigga?
No.
Oh my god. Yo was up there beating shit, boy. Beating the head all type of shit. What the fuck?
Only motherfuckers ain't get beat up was the fucking EMS. I should have got on their ass too.
Step of the process that you were talking about, the capillary electrophoresis.
I've seen you knock the
What
fuck
is
out that police officer.
That is.
Well, I got it popping with his ass.
Put the amplification
I ain't gonna lie, they probably all, you know.
small portion
They
of the
touch before
amplification
shit.
product
I ain't trying to catch that
and
special, gang.
inject it onto an instrument.
Get
And
nigga
what
that
that's
bitch
doing
so
is
crazy,
it
boy.
applies
Ain't no
an
specials
electric
going around.
charge to
That
this little
nigga
liquid
flying with this bitch pockets empty as hell.
No cap.
It's sick as a fuck.
And it runs through a little thin,
Oh my
tiny
God.
straw, so you have a visual, a capillary.
I ain't gonna lie, we can't even
And
post
the
up too.
DNA fragments are
Need to get on
separated
that.
by the size.
Matter move around.
Because all of the STRs have
2
to
minutes,
be
we straight for real.
detectable, and they all can't be the
2
same
minutes,
size.
gang, and nigga ain't making it to no
Oh,
type of
my
test,
days.
gang.
Nigga, what? You know after that minute, it really ain't even a minute for real, boy. Your ass fucked after that.
It's over. Whoever gets smoked right now is over with, gang.
Gone.
A laser will excite that
Man, we should have
fluorescent
slipped
tag
that
and
laser
its
real
light
quick. I think we got
and
enough
that
time.
light
Fuck
is
it.
captured. But again, the DNA fragments migrate or travel through that
The fuck? That's
little
BO?
capillary based on the size. The smaller ones
Stop the car, stop the car, stop the car, stop the car. That's a
migrate
slider, gang.
faster,
I ain't about to
and
play.
the larger ones will migrate slower.
Is this captured in some sort of a chart or diagram that's then presented?
Ooh.
The samples are collected and then they're analyzed through the program. And then I do have
Who was them niggas?
printouts.
It look like
They're called
BO.
electrophotographs.
Gang, why would you go the same route? That's a slider, bro.
Man, you should have bust that right there again.
No
Nigga,
bad.
on this motherfucker so crazy, boy.
No objection.
You know how sick we be? We get hit with that motherfucking wave special.
That's a real slider, gang.
To assist in explaining or illustrating his testimony, please remember that the testimony of the witness is the evidence.
Laser or what?
However, the
You
demonstrative
really got time now, fucking push it.
is not to be considered by you
Fuck,
as
just
evidence in
push
the
Speedy
case
Garage.
unless
When we come back out, we
later
get on
received
their
as
ass.
evidence, and it should not be used as a substitute for evidence. Only
Well,
items
no
of
walking,
evidence
but we done made a lot of
received,
enemies around this bitch.
What, nigga,
will be
police?
available
EMS ain't really fucking with us.
No cap.
This
Oh,
time, this
God.
is not in evidence, it's demonstrative.
Mr. Rhodes, can you-
Restaurant. Oh, I hear a
I'm gonna
bike.
see y'all boys after this shit.
May I?
All right, buddy.
Mr. Rhodes, can you explain kind of what this chart is?
So this is an electrophotogram. This is one of the pages. They typically on 2 or 3 pages.
Man, CK ain't
Based
like
on
that,
whether,
man.
it's a single source.
I thought
or
you was in
mixed
the Discord,
profile.
Goofy.
As you see across the top, there's some red boxes, and
So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see.
there's these red boxes, and then you'll see a bunch of letters and numbers. To the left, you'll see D8S1179. That is one location that I am testing for. It's on the 8th chromosome. I would call it D8 for short. And as you go across to the right, you'll see D21 for short, D18 for short. And these are the locations, or these are the specific STRs.
Hey, you seen what I did to your man? You seen what I did to your man TK,
You
right?
said it's a D8. Is that the address of where this STR
I
is
tried to take
located?
it to the desk.
That's
Stop all that
essentially
playing,
what that
man,
is.
nigga.
It's the location on the chromosome.
When a nigga check
The 8th chromosome and the S1179 gives the more specific
Next time they
location.
kill you, going in there and say,
Can you
Anybody you
describe
slide
that
with,
in
y'all
terms
going in
of
and say, I gotta see the
a
light
house
every time.
address?
Oh,
If
yeah.
the address is 123 Main Street
Niggas
of
wanna
a
kill
house,
bodies, right? Yeah.
how would that correspond
Oh, yeah.
that to what you're looking
T-Boogie,
at?
you looking, gang?
The best I can do is, again, it's on D8 would mean that's DNA on the 8th
That's how you
chromosome,
coming, gang?
and the S1179 gives a more specific location on that chromosome.
That's how you coming, Slime?
Again, we have 23 chromosomes, so there are...
Is that how you coming, nigga? Speak up, nigga.
And do you test and sequence every single marker on every single chromosome when you're doing DNA
Yeah, I thought so,
analysis?
gang, because we know better.
No, it's only the select set of STRs.
Damn, that game already
that is,
started. Fuck.
Used for each
Gerbs, put some shit in here,
specific
gang.
commercial kit. And in this particular kit, I
Put some
use
shit in here I can
what's
get
called
jiggy
the
with,
local
brody.
filer.
And what is local filing?
This
Hey,
specific
why
DNA
TK get his
kit
ass?
used for
Mop,
these
mop,
STRs.
mop,
And how
mop.
many specific locations are you testing for in global filing?
That's a
There are
crazy,
20.
silly ass little update right now, too.
So in terms of the specific evidence that you did in this case, I want to kind of just go
See
in
me
order
dogging TK ass
with
out
your
up there, though?
reports, if that's okay.
Oh,
The items that
right,
were
so
submitted to
came
you
out.
in process
Got beat again.
on that. I'm going to start with the lab member items.
Hey, girls,
16
put a new
and
one in,
17.
gang, for me, buddy.
If you need to refer to your report,
Yes.
Club pills, watch it.
But if he was just going up.
Okay.
okay, so
Well,
items
yours went
16
up,
and
wait.
17, was there a description attached to those items?
There was.
And where do you get the description from?
The description comes from the property receipt as well as the evidence packaging.
If there is a discrepancy between the property receipt and the evidence
My
packaging,
grandson
do
said
you
he
know
started
that?
hurting, he ain't
Yes.
growing nothing but cabbage.
So starting with 16 and 17, what description were you given as to where that swab originated?
These are oral swabs coming from...
You gonna sell this shit to the grocery store,
Item
grandson?
16 is the right side, and item
God,
17
bro,
is
shut
the
your
left side.
stupid ass up.
You test both of them?
Talking about 17.
I did not. I tested one.
Why don't you test both of them?
It's
Hey,
a
dog.
buccal swab or oral swab coming from the same individual. There's not going to be a difference in
I
DNA
just
based
tapped in
off
with
the
the
left side
raspberry
of the
chat. They
sheet
say
or the right side
everything
of the
already.
sheet.
So when you
Started
test
it
item
and over with.
16, can you explain to ladies and gentlemen in the jury how you go through that process?
It is, again, what I mentioned before. I would screen it,
I'm in that bitch
do an
pressing that
extraction,
line on shit, man.
quantify it, do an amplification, and then develop the DNA profile and use
I'm
it
here,
as a
grandson, where you
DNA
at?
standard for Mr. Henry.
Moving on to item number 18. Did you test and that
in the city,
particular
one
item
go?
develop a DNA profile?
I did.
And the DNA profile assigned to item number 18 was...
You ain't see me driving shit around that
It
bitch?
is a DNA spot card
Nah, hell
from
no.
Christopher Thomas.
And in terms of what is a DNA spot
How
card?
convenient.
It's a blood thing collection card taken from the medical examiner.
That shit wow, bro.
And as to item number
Damn, I gotta
19, the
gotta
next
restart my
item,
shit.
did you test and develop a
First you gotta
DNA
restart just like you
standard
do every time
profile
it's
from
updated.
item 19?
Crazy,
And
man.
what was that?
Right.
It was a DNA spot card from Mr. Anthony Williams.
Going forward to item number 20, what was
What's
that?
that shit right there?
It was identified as
What's that battle map
swab
shit?
from water bottle
Bro, I'm about to play Search and Destroy.
PM
S&D.
number 18.
Do you know where that water bottle was?
Hey, get the fuck out of here, bro.
Did you do the
Hey, I hate
DNA
when niggas say,
analysis
like,
on that
I was a Search and
particular
Destroy
item?
legend back in the day.
And can you
That's some new
explain
shit.
what
I hate when niggas
conclusions
say
you
I was
drew
a
on
Search and
that item?
Destroy legend, but then they be weak as hell at Warzone, bro.
That's because it's two different type of play styles, bro.
Oh, so you was a Search and Destroy
The
legend too?
DNA
Then.
profile came from number.
Can't drop 5 kills on
It
Warzone
was
though.
non-interpretable.
But I'm
due to
basically at work
insufficient
on
data.
it.
Can you explain to
You
ladies
said
and
what?
gentlemen
What did you just say?
Bring that up against me.
insufficient data?
You just said what though, bro?
After I
That I'm
do
better than
the
you.
analysis
At what
of
game?
the
Warzone and Search and Destroy.
DNA
Bro, only
products,
thing you ever you better be in is probably MLB, FIFA, or some shit like that, gang.
Look at that
You
left
think you
paragraph.
fucking me at Warzone?
I look at the
Bro,
data,
what?
and I have to
Fuck
determine
outta
is
here,
there
bro.
enough data to determine the number of
You streaming right now?
contributors. Is this a single source profile? Is this a two-person profile? Or a two-person
You can ask your
search, a
chat, bro.
three-person? After looking at the
You gonna
results,
play Big Map Duel?
I
No,
deemed that there
damn.
wasn't enough information to even determine how many number of
T and Grandbaby
contributors were
Wager?
in the profile. So I deemed it insufficient or uninterpretable.
Hey.
So does that mean there wasn't DNA there?
That does, it
Who don't
means
want to
that
1v1 you?
there was DNA,
You got
but I was unable
the real
to
game, right?
make any sort of comparison.
You mentioned that you have to
Jay, you about to
determine
join
the
up?
number of
I wouldn't
contributors.
want to do you like
What
that.
would
bro.
help you determine the number of contributors to a DNA?
You about to join up, Jay?
item?
Join up, nigga.
The number of
got Jay
contributors
added?
is based off of the DNA results.
Why would I have Jay added, bro?
One of the things that I look at
Why
is
would I
the
have
number
Jay
of
added?
alleles
Hey,
that
you
are
ain't
present.
never ran this. You haven't
As
never
I
ran this
mentioned,
bitch,
we
though. I ain't
receive
gonna lie.
half of our DNA from mother, half from our father. So at a specific
Bro,
location,
never ran this bitch.
I would expect to only
He
find
trying
a
to get on
maximum
this
of
bitch
2
playing for
different
fun. We trying to
alleles
win,
per
bro.
location. So if I'm looking at, let's say, D8s, as you can see,
We ain't playing with them
there's
niggas. They got
3
to get used to
alleles
playing
or 3
game,
different
bro.
peaks.
Come on, Jay,
present.
where you at? Load up,
It's a
nigga.
pretty good indication that it's
Join my shit.
coming
Join
from
my
these
shit,
2
Jay.
individuals.
Then we're gonna back off
If
where you
I
want to
see
join.
4 peaks or 4 alleles, maybe 5 alleles,
Jay gonna be the
now
nigga that
there's
stay alive in
potential that there's
resurgence.
3 people that could be contributing to this profile.
Oh,
And
yeah,
after
we
I
need
do
that.
an overall
Stay alive, pick up the
analysis on the
cheese,
entire
bring us the
paragraph,
cheese so we
I
can get
would
load
come
out
to the
easier.
determination of whether it's 2 or 3.
So when you said overall, do you look at each area or each address?
Hey,
because
Jay, come on.
You're looking at individuals?
Individually,
You don't play Apex? Nah. I really was an Apex legend, though.
Enemy soldier incoming.
That shit is raw as hell.
How often do you analyze mixtures?
mixtures usually come up, I would say,
So going on.
I really was an Apex legend, though. No bad.
Item number
The R301. I used to go down with the wingman.
Hostile dropping into the area.
This
Watch
has
the sky.
laser 40,
Yeah, you know
S&W,
Were you able to get any results from item number 21?
I was not.
Longbow sniper, all that.
See what you have learned.
How many kills we got in the pre-lobby? 0?
There wasn't
Bum.
sufficient DNA present in the extract to obtain the DNA results on the extract after I did the application.
Okay, going on
Jay, load
to
up, nigga.
item number 22. What was that described as?
Swab for each samples, PM number 19.
Bro, ass steal somebody, he about to load up, bro. We would have been in the lobby looking goofy as hell.
Bring them back down.
That result
Mark a
was
strong point for your squad.
And were you able to identify the three contributors?
Gotta fuck with that Fortnite, no Cersei.
In terms of, are you able to say
I don't know how to build.
statistic as to each contributor that you identified on item 22 as to their likelihood to contribute?
Yes, so every sample
Double team up here like a
is
bitch.
deemed to be
One tap.
I would then do a comparison to any known samples submitted. So each of the 3 individuals were compared against this mixture.
And were you able to determine whether or not you can give support to Christopher Thomas being included in that mixture?
Enemy UAV overhead.
Yes, the DNA results are 4,730 times more likely if it originated from Christopher Thomas
Enemy
and 2
UAV
unrelated
active.
unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals. And this provides moderate support that Christopher Thomas is
UAV on station.
This is the first time, ladies and gentlemen, can you explain what the verbal qualifiers are?
Drop the goof ass too.
The molecular ratio
She was mad that
can go from really small numbers.
man just sitting on
The
top of
resulting
the
molecular
Draw it back toward me.
Mortar strike on
Draw it
the
back
way.
toward me, gang.
So I will have a local qualifier
Enemy soldier incoming.
on the report.
Hostile UAV in the area.
From limited support, all the way to strong support. Tries to
They gonna be behind you now.
the number that you're hearing.
And so the numbers that you're going to be talking about are exponential at sometimes.
That's correct.
The opposite.
Stay alive, buddy.
If it's an exclusion, what type of number,
I'm gonna
what
put really
type
on
of
that,
words
so
would
stay
you be
alive.
using?
If it's an exclusion, which is really, there's a chance that
It's on the floor, Jay. Stay right there,
there's a
guys.
small likelihood for exclusion, and at that point it would be limited to exclusion.
Go get your
or
revenge.
it just be-
Bro, I say I ain't fucking with stadium no more.
So going back to item 22, you said moderate support as to Christopher Thomas.
Enemy UAV
And
active.
did you also analyze that
Hostile
with
war
regards
strike near your
to
position.
the individual that was identified as Anthony Williams?
I did.
And so what was the likelihood ratio that Anthony Williams was a contributor to the DNA found on those samples?
The DNA results are at least
Your team made
3.07
it to the safe zone.
times 10 to the 25th, or 30.7 septillion. Times more likely it originated from Anthony Williams and 2 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals.
Oh, we got action. Where you at, gang?
Friendly mortar strike on the way. Hostile dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
He was excluded as a contributor.
So you said 30.7 septillion. How many
Enemy
zeros is
UAV
that?
overhead.
There are 25 zeros after the 3.
Why is it that you don't say it's Anthony Williams, Chris Thomas, and some unknown individual?
Sometimes that is included. The likelihood ratio that I'm reporting out now is done on an individual basis. So I would conduct or calculate the likelihood ratio of the first individual, report the number, do a likelihood calculation of the second individual, report the number, and if it's requested, an additional calculation can be done and reported in which both individuals would be included in the mixture.
So I want to make sure it's clear. You're looking at each contributor individually,
Yes.
and that is because it's the hypothesis is either how many times more likely that they are versus that they are not included.
Could you say that again?
You're making me do math. So with regards to the likelihood ratio, the first hypothesis is the number that you come out with, or the number you're reporting. If it is the 30.7 septillion times more likely that they are included, that's the first hypothesis, that they are there and they are included. The second hypothesis is that they are not. So you're saying that it is 30.7 septillion times more likely they are a contributor than they are not. Than they are excluded.
Sort of. I would explain it as, again, these likelihood ratios are, it's a calculation that's going against 2 competing hypotheses.
And like
So
sleeping
there is
down.
more support that Mr. Williams, in this case, would be included, along with 2 other unknown, unrelated individuals, than if the DNA results were coming from 3 unrelated, unknown individuals.
And so for item 22, the swab from the Gucci sandals you had testified Portland Henry was excluded.
That is correct.
Moving on to item number 23. What was that?
It's listed as a cutting blood stain on front of T-shirt. Drew, I'm not sure how to say this, Drew Film Medit CG10.
Okay, going on to item number 23, the cutting from the front of the T-shirt. What were your results on that?
The DNA results were interpreted as a mixture originating from 2 contributors.
Okay.
After doing the comparisons to each individual, the DNA results are at least 982 times more likely if they originated from Christopher Thomas and 1 unrelated unknown individual than if they originated from 2 unrelated individuals. And this provides moderate support that Mr. Thomas is included as a contributor.
And then with regards to Anthony Williams.
The DNA results are 3.22 times 10 to the 25th, or 32.2 septillion. Time is more likely if it originated from Mr. Williams and one unrelated unknown individual than if they originated from two unrelated individuals. And this provides a very strong support that Mr. Williams is included as a contributor.
982 and 32.2 septillion. That's a big difference.
Yes, and that's, again, one of the reasons that the verbal qualifier is put into the report.
In terms of identifying and making a conclusion based on that, is there anything that you take into account as to the amount of DNA that's in there?
The DNA mixtures that are analyzed at the laboratory, that I analyzed, I use a program called StarMix, or STRMix, and this is a program that helps to deconvolute these mixtures. And what deconvolute means is to determine if you have two contributors in the mixture, are you able to tease out or generate essentially who the first contributor would be compared to who the second contributor would be. As the amount of DNA is increased in these DNA extracts and these amplification products, the result becomes more robust, and you would have a more solid comparison, or an easier comparison, maybe that might be the right word. If you have a full single source DNA profile, it's a lot easier to compare to a standard than if you had a really partial DNA profile. And once you start compounding that into a mixture, if you have essentially two partial DNA profiles mixing into one stain, which would then make this partial two-person mixture, doing comparisons may lead to likelihood ratios that are on the lower side, versus if you had two robust DNA profiles, or two robust DNA sources of DNA making a mixture, and then the likelihood ratios may result in a number that's far larger and more support for the inclusion.
Okay, so I want to make sure it's clear. If you have 1 gallon of blood from one individual and 1 drop of blood from another individual, is that still, you can get out two profiles?
There is a potential to this, but again, it depends on the overall result.
Would that come across in the data that you're looking at?
Absolutely.
And how would that read out in the data?
When I look at a DNA profile, mixture profile, you can see, or oftentimes you can see that there is one contributor that is contributing or providing more genetic material to the mixture versus the second contributor or third contributor. So you'll see differences in the peak heights or the alleles or the characteristics as you go across the electrophotogram. And you can, I can look and see, hey, this looks like a two-person mixture. This one contributor is providing more DNA material than this other contributor.
As to item number 23, can you say which individual contributed more genetic material to that cutting on the front of the t-shirt Drew filmed it?
I cannot specifically say that, but the likelihood ratio would provide the verbal qualifier that there's very strong support that Mr. Williams was included as the issue, or to the issue.
So going, and then in terms of, did you also analyze that cutting against Portland Henry?
I did. Mr. Henry was excluded as a contributor.
So I want to also take a moment here to talk about different types of DNA and serology. Did you do serology on this particular item 23?
I did, yes. I did a presumptive test for the indications of blood, and it was positive.
If there are blood genetic material and epithelial genetic material, does that change your analysis in any way? Do you know they're commingled?
No, it doesn't.
And why not?
If a stain has potential blood on it, I'm going to take a cutting or a sampling based off of that size of that blood stain, because I can't saturate my DNA extract with all the blood DNA from the blood stain in hopes that I obtain enough or there is any second contributor from any potential epithelial cells. And epithelial cells are basically the skin cells on the outside surfaces of your body. So if I were to rub this bench top here, deposit some of my DNA from my skin cells from my hand, and then there's a blood stain that comes up next to it. If the investigator swabs this, essentially this mixture of my DNA plus the blood stain, the blood is going to, for the most part, cover up or provide a majority of that DNA, because the blood is a far richer source of DNA than the skin cells.
Is a person's DNA the same in every cell in their body?
It is.
So going on to now item number 23. What is that described as? I'm sorry, 24. We just finished 23. Item 24. What is that described as?
The cutting blood stain on rear of t-shirts, Drew Philmetit, CG10.
Did you do a DNA analysis on item number 24?
I did. It was interpreted as originating from a single male contributor.
And were you able to make a reasonable or a likelihood ratio as to which individual contributed to that blood stain?
I did the comparisons to the 3 individuals. The DNA results are at least 1.59 times 10 to the 25th, or 15.9 septillion times more likely if they originated from Mr. Thomas, Christopher Thomas, than if they originated from one unrelated, unknown individual.
Were you
Mr. Henry and Mr. Williams were excluded as contributors.
My next question. So with regards to item number 25, were you able to conduct a DNA analysis of that item?
I did.
What was that item identified to you as?
Swab, blood stain, G12, Air Jordan, sneaker E.
Were you able to come to a conclusion as to the source of that blood stain?
I obtained a DNA profile and interpreted it as originating from a single male contributor. Mr. Williams, where all 3 individuals were compared, in comparison to Mr. Anthony Williams. The results are at least 5.3 times 10 to the 25th, or 53 septillion, times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams than if they originated from one unrelated, unknown individual. Mr. Henry and Mr. Thomas were excluded as contributors.
So I want to move on to the next report that you did. In terms of the crime lab and how it works, when evidence is submitted to the lab, is it submitted in batches from the investigative agencies?
That's what he laughing for. Oh, you laughing?
Policy, so based
This nigga think it's a joke.
Incident that's being investigated. There's
oh my life, look at him. He can't even hold it in.
In the cases of homicides, they're typically 10
what
to
you
12
laughing at?
items per
This little goof ass,
testing
man.
round is what we call it.
He's supposed to have
We
on a
want the
poker
investigators
face.
to provide the most probative value, the most probative evidence for their investigation first, and then move on after that. With the cases of maybe a non-suspect burglary case, you may only get 2 evidence items worth.
In terms of limits on homicide cases, is there any limit to the number of items that can be worked?
There's no limit as far as I know. Again, we just, it's worked in series of samples so that 100 or 150 items aren't submitted all at once. Again, to try and have the investigator determine which would be the most probative evidence for the investigation.
And in terms of your role in that process, do you know the underlying facts of the investigation as it's progressing?
Sometimes yes, but mostly no. I'm typically just assigned the case. There may be some communications between the unit supervisor and the investigator as to why more evidence is being submitted or reasons why the investigator is requesting more evidence.
In front of you, there's a stack of items that have already been admitted into evidence. If I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
We've talked about a few already here. Do you recognize the green sticker on this item that's already been admitted as State 58? Please.
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you recognize that?
On the back, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and all the other numbers as they were submitted to the laboratory.
And do you then assign the individual numbers that we talked about?
Yes, the numbers are assigned based off our record-keeping system. They're a sequential number, so the first item gets number 1, and then sequentially down the line.
Okay. Moving on to what's been placed into evidence as State 53. Again, do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and my item numbers marked on it.
What's been previously admitted into evidence as State 33. Do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has all my markings on it.
Okay. As to what has been admitted as State 46.
Yes, again, the items are marked and my notations are on the evidence.
Okay. And as to item State 32, did you ever get this one?
I don't think so.
So the answer is no.
No, I do not, because my markings are not on here.
Okay. As to what's been admitted as State 26, have you reviewed that item?
Yes, I have.
Is that
I've
okay?
marked it and put my laboratory item numbers and my initials.
So I'm approaching with what's been previously marked as State GG for identification purposes only. Okay, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as State GG for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that item? Please. It is open.
Yes, it has my markings on it, case number, item numbers, initials.
Did you analyze the items inside of that package?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Hold on just a moment. So showing defense counsel, it's been marked as State triple T. Correct. Showing you what's been marked as State triple T for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that item?
I do. It again has my information marked on the outside.
And did you collect that item?
No, I did not collect it.
Is that an item that you analyzed?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll come back to that. Thank you so much. So all of the items that we're looking at here, Mr. Rhodes, are packaged in paper bags.
Or manila envelopes, yes.
Why is that?
The investigators use these types of evidence packaging in case the evidence is wet. It helps to allow air to get through the package to dry it. One of the things that will cause issues, degradation, is essentially having a biological stain remain wet, and mold, mildew, and bacteria will grow on it and potentially destroy any DNA that's present.
Is it important to keep DNA in a dry environment for preserving it?
Yes.
Is there limits on the temperature range in which the DNA is kept at the evidence vault?
There's no limits. The evidence vaults in the laboratories are around 60 degrees, maybe 65. We do have freezers that we have old cases. So as long as the evidence is kept cool and dry, and being frozen is cool and dry, the DNA will persist for decades.
In terms of if the DNA is heated, would that cause degradation to it?
Yes, heat, moisture, and sunlight are three of the main factors that will cause degradation and essentially destruction of the DNA present.
So why don't they just keep it in plastic bags?
The plastic won't allow any air to get through to the evidence, and it will basically cause condensation if it's moist. If the evidence is moist or wet, which will then lead to the mold, mildew, and bacteria growing.
Can one person's DNA change to become someone else's?
No.
How does it not? Does air bring other DNA into those bags and samples?
No.
So going back now on to item number 26 that you processed. What was that identified as to you?
Swab from Yellow Jacket.
And there's another number that you list in your notes and reports of an 81. Where is that number coming from?
The first number, 26, is the item number that is generated in the laboratory when I am doing inventory in my inventory system. The 81 is the agency number as it's submitted on the prior receipt.
Okay. So going on to item number 26, did you analyze the swab of the Yellow Jacket as it's described?
I did, yes.
And what were your conclusions on that particular item?
The results were interpreted as a mixture originating from 4 contributors.
So were you able to make determinations as to the standards that you had?
I did, yes.
Okay, if we could discuss first with regards to Anthony Williams. What conclusion did you reach and what statistical basis for that?
He was included as a contributor to the mixture in the likelihood calculation. The results are at least 2.05 times 10 to the 8th, or 205 million. Times more likely if these DNA results originated from Anthony Williams and 3 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 4 unrelated unknown individuals.
In terms of a 4-person mixture, do you expect the statistics to be a little bit lower, just based on that?
It depends on, again, when I was speaking of contribution, if a person is more represented in a sample, the statistics or likelihood calculation can be rather large. It just depends on how much contribution is in that mixture.
Were you able to exclude anybody from the swab of the Yellow Jacket item 26?
Christopher Thomas and Cortland Henry were excluded.
In terms of item number 27, how was that I'm sorry. Yes, item number 27. How was that number identified to you?
Swab from Gatorade bottle.
Were you able to analyze that and develop DNA profiles?
I obtained a single source profile indicating male origin.
Were you able to determine the single source origin of that profile?
Christopher Thomas was included. The likelihood calculation is as follows. The DNA results are at least 1.65 times 10 to the 25th, or 16.5 septillion. Times more likely if they originated from Mr. Thomas than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
Okay. Going on to item number 28. Did you do the same?
I did.
And what was that listed as?
Swab from Gatorade bottle.
And that swab, who were you able to determine, or what DNA conclusions were you able to make?
The DNA results were interpreted as originated from a single male contributor. Mr. Anthony Williams was included. The likelihood calculation, the DNA results are at least 4.38 times 10 to the 25th, or 43.8 septillion times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
At this point in everything that we have talked about, were you provided a standard for the defendant, Jamel Devins?
No.
So going on to item number 29, were you able to develop a DNA profile on that particular item?
I analyzed the results and deemed it to be uninterpretable due to limited data.
And what was item number 29?
It's listed as swab from bloodstain on rear passenger seat, PM number 1.
And you couldn't say where that was collected from?
I cannot.
Going on to your next report, I'm going to talk about the MVAC filter. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what is an MVAC filter?
An MVAC filter is it's a filter paper where the investigator will essentially soak the surface of whatever they're looking for, maybe a shirt or a shoe or even a door, in a liquid, and they come back and they vacuum it up. And all of that vacuumed up liquid will then go and be deposited on the filter paper. That filter paper is then taken out of the apparatus, dried, and then I would take a portion of that filter paper and try and develop a DNA profile from the surface that they process.
Excuse me, I didn't hear the item number. What's the back?
It's item number 31 of his report.
Thank you.
So on the MVAC filter, item 31 that you were asked to process in this case, what would your information relate as to where that MVAC source was?
It's identified as MVAC filter 9 from spent casings found on ground at US 27 and Southwest 208th Avenue.
So we talked a little bit about things that are conducive to DNA. Does sunlight have an effect on it, you said, I believe, right?
Yes, it can.
What does sunlight do to DNA if exposed?
Again, with the heat, light, and moisture, it allows bacteria to grow and to essentially degrade the DNA.
Okay. And when you did an analysis of item number 31, the MVAC filter, what conclusions were you able to draw?
I did an extraction on the piece of evidence, and after quantitation, I determined that there was insufficient amount of extracted DNA to go forward. So I did not attempt to develop a DNA profile, and I stopped processing at that point.
And if you remind ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what does it mean if you stop it at that second step?
The extraction, meaning I would not obtain a DNA profile that could be used for any sort of comparisons. There just isn't enough genetic material in the extract.
What is the information, what are you relying on, and what training and experience to make that conclusion?
It's the quantitation results, the type of samples that I have obtained, or that I analyzed. So I'm not surprised that MVACs from casings yield very little DNA.
Moving on to your next report, item 32. Was that item provided to you for DNA analysis?
It was, yes.
And that is in evidence, I believe, if I may, as states 46.
Yes.
So if I may, published for the jury.
You may.
So I'm publishing now states 46. What was states 46 reported to you to be?
These are oral swabs or standards from juvenile demons.
And with regards to item number 32 and 33 in your report, are they the same?
Item number 32 is listed as the right cheek, and 33 is listed as the left cheek.
Similar to we previously talked about, did you just pick one to test?
Correct, I did, just the first one.
Is there any rhyme or reason as to picking the right versus the left?
Nope.
Going on, and so once you got this standard, did you go back and look at the other evidence you previously analyzed?
Yes, so comparisons were made to all the previously analyzed questioned evidence.
So going to item number 22, the swab from the Gucci sandals. Were you able to compare the profile from Mr. Demons as opposed to the profile developed from those sandals?
I did, and he was excluded.
The blood stain on the front of the t-shirt, item number 23. Were you able to compare Mr. Denman's profile to that?
I did a comparison and he was again excluded.
What about item number 24, the cutting on the blood stain of the rear of the t-shirt?
After comparisons were done, he was excluded.
Okay, then on item number 25, the swab of the blood stain from the Air Jordans.
Again, an exclusion.
Going on to item number 26, the swab from the yellow jacket.
An exclusion as well.
And in terms of the item number 27 and 28, the swabs of the Gatorade bottles. What were the results on that?
Those were both exclusions.
So going forward to what's been shown to you but not yet admitted into evidence for identification purposes is state triple T. What was that item told to you to be?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. On your item 34, what's been shown to you for identification purposes only as state triple T. What was that item described to you to be?
It's listed as a cutting of headliner.
And how did you analyze that particular piece of evidence?
That evidence, I had to do a visual examination on it and actually take a cutting of a potential blood stain.
And can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what's the difference between using it from a swab versus a cutting of an item?
This was a piece of evidence, a headliner. It was the size, maybe a foot squared. There were some small red brown stains on there. So there's oftentimes where the evidence itself is better to be submitted as opposed to moistening a cotton tip swab and then swabbing it, just in case the small blood stain becomes too diffuse on the cotton tip swab. And why that's important is I do my best to preserve evidence for future testing. So if an item of evidence is submitted, I typically process only half of the evidence. If there's only one swab submitted, I'll process half of the swab, leaving half for retesting either in current technologies by another laboratory or save it for future testing when technology has advanced even further.
Bluetooth connected.
What are the benefits of using LinkedIn?
Networking, big bullet point. Learning about different opportunities and different spaces that exist within the industry and bring us together in a way that we can support each other and learn from each other.
Did you also do serology on that specific item?
I did. I did presumptive testing for blood and it was positive.
When you're doing DNA testing on this, will you know without doing serology if something is epithelial or blood?
I would know.
In this case, the serology indicated blood. And which test did you use to determine that?
I used a phenolphthalein test.
And were any individuals excluded from that sample?
Mr. Henry, Mr. Thomas, and Mr. Devins were excluded as contributors.
So moving on to item number 40. We're getting towards the end. With regards to item number 40, was that item submitted and analysis done?
Yes.
Okay. What was item number 40? What steps of the DNA process did you take it through as well?
Item number 40 was extracted for DNA, but after quantitation, there wasn't a sufficient amount of DNA to move forward, so I did not attempt to do any DNA profiling.
And what was item number 40 described as?
A contact swab of non-blood area rear of driver's seat.
And is this the same discussion we had with regards to the last item? With not enough DNA, so then you stop it at that first step?
Correct, after extraction. Sure, after quantitation.
Why don't you at least try and take it through and go through all the steps?
Oftentimes the quantitation results in a 0, meaning none was detected. Sometimes it results in a null value, meaning not even less than 0 was obtained. So at that point, I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to obtain a DNA profile.
Do you do a control swab or sample as you're going through the DNA process each time?
The DNA processing has several controls during extraction. I have a reagent blank, and this is just a sample of just the reagents by themselves. The extraction reagents that I use will be processed with the samples to ensure that the reagents are free of contaminants. When I do a amplification for PCR, there will be a positive control and a negative control. The negative control is again just a tube of reagents. There shouldn't be any DNA present at the end. And the positive control is a known DNA standard. And so after I do my amplification, the negative control needs to be blank, and the positive control needs to I need to generate the DNA profile from that positive control.
So let's go back. You mentioned reagents. I don't think we've defined that for the jury here today. What is a reagent?
Reagents are the chemicals that I use for my DNA processing.
Are they standard and part of the kit that you were talking about earlier?
There are different components in the amplification kit, quantitation kit. We have different reagents used for extraction. So at every step there are a set of reagents that we use.
And those are all related to the controls as well?
Correct.
So going back, so once we talked about that, let's start talking about item number 41. What was item 41 described to you as?
It's listed as blood swab of smear from rear of driver's seat.
Were you able to come to any sort of conclusion as to item 41?
I obtained some results, but I reported that they were uninterpretable due to limited data.
What does that mean?
Meaning I obtained the electrocardiogram stage. I've analyzed the ending result of that PCR amplification and deemed that there wasn't sufficient amount of DNA to make any comparisons.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to item number 66. Did you analyze that particular item?
I did.
And in terms of what was item number 66?
Item number 66 was initially reported as contact swab of rear of driver's side door handle interior.
Were you able to determine what the packaging of item number 66 said?
Yes, the contact swab of rear of driver's side door handle interior.
I'm sorry, on number 66 is which?
Front of driver's side door handle.
So you can't testify as to which it came from?
I'm not sure of the question.
You didn't collect this item of evidence?
No, I didn't.
Oh. So after reviewing the item analysis, did you amend your report to read contact swab of front driver's side door handle interior?
That's right.
Okay. So going on to item number 42, which is been labeled as item 66 by the Mirror-Markers Department. What results did you have?
Again, I obtained a DNA profile, but ruled it or determined it to be uninterpretable due to limited data.
Does uninterpretable mean no DNA?
In this case, no. There was DNA present, but it was insufficient amounts to make any sort of determination. Number of contributors or even comparisons.
Are you still looking back at those same standards that we've talked about previously?
The interpretation of the question samples is done prior to looking at the interpretation of the notes.
Why is that?
It's to avoid any sort of bias. I want to make my interpretation calls of those unknowns absent of knowing what the known standards are.
Does the computer do any of this analysis or say, hey, it's person A or person B for you?
No, it does not.
So moving on to item number 43. Is that the last item you tested in this case?
Yes.
So with regards to what was item number 43 listed as?
Swab, rear driver's side door, handle interior.
Were you able to do DNA testing on that particular item?
I did. Yes.
Did you develop a profile?
I did.
And can you explain what DNA profile you developed?
In this particular case, I reported out both a 2-person mixture and a 3-person mixture.
And so explain why you would report out 2 different hypotheses.
When I did the initial interpretation of the question sample of this item 43, there was the appearance of a 2-person mixture. After doing a comparison to the known standards and doing the likelihood calculation, the result was essentially unintuitive. There was a lot of contribution being attributed to an individual, but then resulted in an exclusionary likelihood ratio.
So can you explain what that means in a little bit simpler math terms, if possible?
Yeah, essentially the likelihood ratio resulted in exclusion. So after talking with my technical leader, I determined that we both came to the consensus that it would be best to report out or then interpret it as a 3-person mixture and then report out both results.
So with regards to when you're saying it's an exclusion, is there a certain number of loci that it has to not match for you to report it as an exclusion?
When it comes to likelihood ratios, as I had mentioned before, it's doing it's comparing 2 hypotheses, essentially that a person is included versus a person, an unrelated unknown individual is included. And it does this at every specific location. So going through all of those locations, there's the potential to have 16, 17, 18 locus-specific likelihoods, likelihood ratios. And at the end of it, those are all multiplied together to get the final result. So if one specific location results in a 0 likelihood ratio, but everything else is inclusionary, it's an indication that there's an issue with how the software was set up. And so as an analyst, I would go back and see what the issue was and then rerun this deconvolution and redo the calculations. In this particular case, after doing a visual comparison of the standards to the mixture and then looking at the resulting likelihood ratios, again, I spoke with the technical leader and we determined that there will be best to report out both.
So I'm going to go starting with the alternative proposition on that. Were you able to exclude anyone in the alternative proposition that you put forth?
Mr. Cortland Henry was excluded.
With regards to the initial proposition?
Cortland Henry, Anthony Williams, and Jamel Dimmons were excluded.
Who was included on the initial proposition?
Christopher Thomas was included.
When you were looking at it as 2 contributors, how did you exclude the defendant in this case, Mr. Dimmons?
How did I exclude him?
Yes.
So again, after doing the visual comparison and then running it through to generate the likelihood ratio, it resulted in an exclusionary likelihood ratio.
When you looked at it again as a 3-person mixture, were you able to make a determination as to whether or not Christopher Thomas was included as a source of that mixture?
Yeah, he was included as a 3-person as well.
And what were the statistics on the three-person mixture for Christopher Thomas?
The results are at least 8.15 times 10 to the 24th, or 8.15 septillion times more likely if they originated from Christopher Thomas and 2 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals.
In terms of as to Cortland Henry, were you able to do the statistical calculations as to whether or not he was excluded on a three-person mixture on item number 43, swab of rear driver's side door handle material?
Yes, the results are at most 46, and this is an inverse LR calculation because the number was less than 1. So the DNA results are at most 46 times more likely if it originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals than if it originated from Cortland Henry and 2 unrelated unknown individuals.
So is your conclusion that Mr. Henry is excluded from that sample?
Yes.
Okay. Going on to Anthony Williams, were you able to make a conclusion as to whether or not he was included or excluded?
I did. He was included. The LR calculation, the DNA results are at least 41.2 times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams and 2 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals.
And in terms of the verbal qualifier that you would give for Mr. Williams being included in that sample, what verbal qualifier would you give?
Limited support for inclusion.
Is that the lowest for inclusion?
Yes.
Okay. I believe I forgot to ask you with Christopher Thomas, what verbal qualifier would you give if he is included on that?
It is the highest at very strong support.
And at last but not least, were you able to analyze the profile of the defendant, Jamel Demmons, in this case?
I did, yes.
And what was your conclusion in a three-person mixture as to the results of Mr. Demmons being included or excluded?
He was included. The likelihood calculation, the DNA results are at least 2.12 times 10 to the 8th, or 212 million times more likely if they originated from Jamel Demmons and 2 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals.
And what verbal qualifier did you give to that particular item of
Very-
Mr. Demmons being included?
There is very strong support for the inclusion.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
May I?
If you're ready, you may proceed. Sure. We'll take a short recess. Do not discuss the case. Don't form any opinion about the case. Don't allow anyone to discuss the case in the presence. Serving no research. Just leave your notepads on the chair.
Passion. Spontaneity. Allergies. Get ready to take on all 3. Introducing Astapro Allergy. Nasal allergy symptom relief that starts working in 30 minutes, so you can get back to feeling sexy. Fast. Because no one feels sexy with allergies.
Hey, welcome back to Law and Crime. So how does this happen? How do these guys that are working so closely together in the rap industry in South Florida, how does this unfold one night in October of 2018? They're all in a car. Maybe the defendant, Jamel Demmons, is in that car. Maybe he's not. But somehow, in the end of the night, 2 of his buddies, Anthony Williams a.k.a. Sack Chaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., a.k.a. Juvie. They're dead. They're literally taken to the hospital a little after 4 in the morning. They left the studio about 2:17. How did all this unfold and what happened? The prosecution says that Demmons did it, period. We haven't heard a great story about motive. We know you don't need one. Maybe there was some money issue, licensing. We've heard a little testimony on that maybe Demmons wanted all of that money for himself, so he kind of cut out some of the middlemen. And that's about all we know at this point. So we are in the middle of the prosecution's case, and we are hearing DNA testimony that we expect is going to more clearly link these parties and where they were that night. Remember, there's a question as to who was in the car. Were the shots fired from within the car, or were they, as Demmons suggests, the victim of a drive-by that night? So all these questions still up in the air, and the prosecution doing their best to get them answered. Right now, Kurt Rhodes on the stands. He's the DNA dude, and he's trying to help this jury understand what happened that night when these two men died. Let's go back into the courtroom.
What is that described as? I'm sorry, 24. We just finished 23. Item 24. What is that described as?
The cutting blood on rear of T-shirts, Drew Philbedit, CG10.
Did you do a DNA analysis on item number 24?
I did. It was interpreted as originating from a single male contributor.
And were you able to make a reasonable or a likelihood ratio as to which individual contributed to that blood stain?
I did the comparisons to the 3 individuals. The DNA results are at least 1.59 times 10 to the 25th, or 15.9 septillion times more likely if they originated from Mr. Thomas, Christopher Thomas, than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
Were you
Mr. Henry and Mr. Williams were excluded as contributors.
My next question. So with regards to item number 25, were you able to conduct a DNA analysis of that item?
I did.
What was that item identified to you as?
Swab, bloodstain, G12, Air Jordan, sneaker E.
Were you able to come to a conclusion as to the source of that bloodstain?
I obtained a DNA profile and interpreted as originating from a single male contributor. Mr. Williams, where all 3 individuals were compared, in comparison to Mr. Anthony Williams. The results are at least 5.3 times 10 to the 25th, or 53 septillion, times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual. Mr. Henry and Mr. Thomas were excluded as contributors.
So I want to move on to the next report that you did. In terms of the crime lab and how it works, when evidence is submitted to the lab, is it submitted in batches from the investigative agencies?
When evidence is submitted, we have a submission policy. So based off of the type of incident that's being investigated, there's essentially a number of items that can be submitted. In the cases of homicides, there are typically 10 to 12 items per testing round, is what we call it. We want the investigators to provide the most probative evidence for their investigation first, and then move on after that. With the cases of maybe a non-suspect burglary case, you may only get 2 evidence items worth.
In terms of limits on homicide cases, is there any limit to the number of items that can be worked?
There's no limit as far as I know. Again, it's worked in a series of samples so that 100 or 150 items aren't submitted all at once. Again, to try and have the investigator determine which would be the most probative evidence for the investigation.
And in terms of your role in that process, do you know the underlying facts of the investigation as it's progressing?
Sometimes yes, but mostly no. I'm typically just assigned the case. There may be some communications between the unit supervisor and the investigator as to why more evidence is being submitted or reasons why the investigator is requesting more evidence.
In front of you, there's a stack of items that have already been admitted into evidence. If I may approach, Your Honor. We've talked about a few already here. Do you recognize the green sticker on this item that's already been admitted as State 58? Please.
Yes.
And how do you recognize that?
On the back, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and all the item numbers as they were submitted to the laboratory.
And do you then assign the individual numbers that we talked about?
Yes, the numbers are assigned based off our record-keeping system. They're a sequential number, so the first item gets number 1, and then sequentially down the line.
Okay. Moving on to what's been placed into evidence as State 53. Again, do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and my item numbers marked on it.
What's been previously admitted into evidence as State 33. Do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has all my markings on it.
Okay. As to what has been admitted as State 46.
Yes, again, the items are marked and my limitations on the evidence.
Okay. And as to item State 32, did you ever get this one?
I don't think so.
So the answer is no.
No, I do not, because my markings are not on here.
Okay. As to what's been admitted as State 26, have you reviewed that item?
Yes, I have. I've marked it and with my laboratory item numbers and my initials.
So I'm approaching with what's been previously marked as State GG for identification purposes only. Okay, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as State GG for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that item? Please. It is open.
Yes, it has my markings on it, case number, item numbers, initials.
Did you analyze the items inside of that package?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Hold on just a moment. So showing defense counsel, it's been marked as State triple T. Correct. Showing you what's been marked as State triple T for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that item?
I do. It again has my information marked on the outside.
And did you collect that item?
No, I did not collect it.
Is that an item that you analyzed?
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Thank you so much. So all of the items that we're looking at here, Mr. Rhodes, are packaged in paper bags.
Or manila envelopes. Yes.
Why is that?
The investigators use these types of evidence packaging in case the evidence is wet. It helps to allow air to get through the package to dry it. One of the things that will cause issues, degradation, is essentially having a biological stain remain wet, and mold, mildew, and bacteria will grow on it and potentially destroy any DNA that's present.
Is it important to keep DNA in a dry environment for preserving it?
Yes.
Is there limits on the temperature range in which the DNA is kept at the evidence vault?
There's no limits. The evidence vaults in laboratories are about 60 degrees, maybe 65. We do have freezers that we have old cases So as long as the evidence is kept cool and dry, and being frozen is cool and dry, the DNA will persist for decades.
In terms of if the DNA is heated, would that cause degradation to it?
Yes, heat, moisture, and sunlight are three of the main factors that will cause degradation and essentially destruction of the DNA present.
So why don't they just heat it in plastic bags?
The plastic won't allow any air to get through to the evidence, and it will basically cause condensation if it's moist. If the evidence is moist or wet, which will then lead to the mold, mildew, and bacteria growing.
Can one person's DNA change to become someone else's?
No.
How does it not? Does air bring other DNA into those bags and samples?
No.
So going back now on to item number 26 that you processed. What was that identified as to you?
Swab from Yellow Jacket.
And there's another number that you list in your notes and reports of an 81. Where is that number coming from?
The first number, 26, is the item number that is generated in the laboratory when I am doing inventory in my inventory system. The 81 is the agency number as it's submitted on the prior season.
Okay. So going on to item number 26, did you analyze the swab of the Yellow Jacket as it's described?
I did, yes.
And what were your conclusions on that particular item?
The results were interpreted as a mixture originating from 4 contributors.
So were you able to make determinations as to...
Jury entry.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. Let the record once again reflect the presence of the defendants, evidence, his counsel, and assistant state attorney. So, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, witness remains on the stand. Counsel, this is your opportunity for cross-examination. If you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you. I'm going to say good evening to you.
Yes, good
I feel like it's nighttime. By any chance, do you know George Bellow?
He is the unit supervisor for the firearms section.
Yeah. He gave us an education on firearms, and you've now given us an education on DNA. So he said he would give us some type of certificate. So I expect you also to get some type of certificate on DNA. But in any event, when did you perform your first DNA testing? The date, please.
May I refer to my notes?
Absolutely. Feel free at any time.
My initial examination of the first evidence was on January 23 of 2019.
2019.
Correct.
And that's when you analyzed or examined various items that came out of a grade G. That was water bottle, some sneakers, I think, a yellow jacket, a Gatorade bottle, item 27, I think you identified.
For this particular date, it was items 16 through 25.
16 through 25, okay. On 123 of 19, you examined a water bottle, a spent casing, Gucci sandals, and a blood stain on front of a t-shirt and a blood stain on the rear of the t-shirt. And also a blood stain on an Air Jordan sneaker, correct?
That's correct.
That turned out not to come back to this young man right over here, correct? Mr. Demons. I'm going to call him Jamel. It's easier. Okay. Isn't that correct?
At this time or later?
Later.
Later. May I refer to my report?
Absolutely. And give us a date that you did that.
Absolutely.
Please.
So on January 25th of 2022 is when the comparisons were made to Mr. Devins, and he was excluded from all those items.
That was January of what?
The report was issued on January 25th of 2022.
I'm sorry.
I did my analysis on January 24th, the day before.
Okay. That was approximately 3 years after he was arrested. Did you know that?
I did not.
Then you analyzed, did you not, item 26, a yellow jacket, a Gatorade bottle, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And what date did you examine those items?
That was on August 24th of 2021.
August 24th, you said?
Correct.
Of 21. That was 2 years approximately after he was arrested. Did you know that?
I did not.
And those came from inside the Jeep. Did you know that?
I did not.
And those did not match Jamel, correct?
That's correct. He was excluded.
Then you received some additional items, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What was the date that you received the additional items?
They were received on multiple days.
Okay, give us the first date you received additional items, please.
I began processing the impact filter on January 5th of 2022.
That was approximately 3 years after his arrest.
The cutting of the headliner, which is item 34.
When did you receive that?
I began processing on January 28th of 2022.
Okay. Also about 3 years after his arrest.
Objection, counsel's testifying.
I thought it was a question. Restate it. Restate your question.
Did you know it was approximately 3 years after he was arrested?
I did not. Additional items were submitted. These were items 40, 41, and 42. Those were processed on April 25th of 2023.
April 25th of 23?
That's correct.
Did you know that was after we started this trial?
Objection, Your Honor, improper.
Excuse me. Why don't you come sidewalk?
did you know that when you received the blood stain on the headliner, that was after this trial started?
I did not know.
But you started that in April 25th of 23? Just 2 months ago?
The headliner was, that was prior.
Oh, I'm sorry. The item that you received on April of 23 was what?
Those were the contact swab, non-blood area, rear driver seat, the blood swab of smear from rear of driver seat, and the contact swab of front driver side door handle interior.
Okay. And you did not know that was after this trial started, correct?
I did not know.
And none of that came back to the DNA of this young man, Jamel, correct?
Correct. It was deemed uninterpretable, as well as one of the items I did not attempt to generate a DNA profile because there was insufficient amount of DNA.
Do you know what the delay was in sending that evidence to you?
Objection, outside the scope, speculation.
And did you receive any other items in 2023?
Yes, one last item, item 43.
And that was the door handle of the rear door? Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And did I hear you correctly that you first ran a test and it did not come back matching or belonging to or contributor to Jamel?
That's correct.
And did I also hear you correctly then you discussed something about your software with your supervisor?
With the technical leader, yes.
And then ran another test and had a 3-person contributor?
That's correct, yes.
And all of a sudden it matched or was labeled as Jamel may have been a contributor?
That's correct.
What date was that, sir?
That was on June 1st, 2023.
Approximately 3 weeks ago?
That's correct.
Who requested that,
Objection,
if you know?
What's the objection?
speculation, outside the scope.
Well, as far as outside the scope, so if he knows, he can answer.
Who submitted that item to you 3 weeks ago?
It would have been Miramar, the investigators.
Miramar Police Department?
Yes, I can look at my
Feel
submission
free.
report. It was submitted by Miramar investigator. Mark Moretti.
Moretti.
Who was listed on the submission form.
And that was the only item that supposedly matched Jamel's DNA, correct?
I believe so. I can look back just to confirm it.
Please do.
But I do believe that is an accurate assessment. Yes, it was an item with the inclusionary legislation.
Could you tell these folks when that DNA was placed on supposedly on the door handle?
No.
It could have been placed a week.
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
How long can DNA stay on an item?
The DNA can persist on items. Again, as I mentioned, heat, light, moisture can cause it to degrade or become unusable. But if DNA is deposited on the surface, it can last weeks, months, years, kept in a nice, cool, dry environment.
Did you know this Jeep was stored in police custody in a safe, dry area?
I do not.
May I have one other question? One other moment, excuse me. Thank you very much.
Is there any redirection?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Rhodes, is it unusual to receive multiple submissions over the life of a case?
No, it's not unusual.
Does the date in which you work a particular item have any effect on the results you report?
No, it is not.
As to the likelihood ratio on item number 43, who was included in that particular item?
For both propositions, Mr. Thomas was included for both the two-person and three-person contributor propositions. Under the two-person proposition, Mr. Henry, Mr. Williams, and Mr. Dimmons were excluded. Under the three-person proposition, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Williams, and Mr. Dimmons were included.
And with regards to the time of collection of that swab, would that be indicated on the box that it is found in?
Sometimes there are indications on the collection. I can look at the card receipt. It may, I'm not sure if it's a newer one or an older one, but I can look at the card receipt if you'd like.
Okay, and that would be item number 67, what's been put into evidence as states 33. Latex or not?
Yeah, latex.
And so item 33 in evidence, is that item number 67 and you're labeling here?
Yes, that's right.
What was the date and time of collection according to that specific item?
So it's dated at 10/26 of 2018.
And the time?
1736.
Oh.
To New York City, the good and the bad. I'm doing something totally liberating. Life's too short not to try something new. I love it when you do that thing.
If DNA is stored in an optical environment, will it persist forever?
I'm not sure about forever, but it will persist for decades.
And in terms of if it is collected on a cotton swab that is dry and sterile, is that an ideal place to perpetuate DNA storage?
Yes.
Nothing further.
I have one or two questions based on that, if the court will allow me.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
You indicated that it's not unusual to get multiple submissions of evidence.
Yes, sir.
Do you know why it took 5 years to submit that exhibit to you to analyze?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
He knows he can answer, do you know?
I do not.
Thank you.
Counsel, is there any else in this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Is he excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Step Counsel, you're excused. Ladies and gentlemen, my understanding is that's all the witnesses we have for today, and so we'll see everybody back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Remember the admonition, do not discuss the case, don't form any opinion about the case, don't allow anyone to discuss the case in the presence of certainly no research, just leave your notepads on your chairs. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you, sir. You're excused. Anything to discuss, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to do a sidebar.
Sidebar?
Yes.
Mr. Jury counsel.
Are you? Because of the cameras, I think we can prove this far.
Oh, sidebar.
Thank you.
So cross-examination continuing in the Jamel Demons case. It is the DNA expert Kurt Rhodes, and I'm telling you, I'm here with Rich Schoenstein and Anna Yum. In the first 2 minutes of the cross-examination, Anna, I really felt like I learned more than throughout the entire direct examination of this witness. The key points, all of these things he tested were not connected to Melly, and the testing was done 2 to 3 years after he was arrested. Give me your take on that.
Absolutely. Talk about starting off cross-examination with a bang. I mean, there's a big contrast in terms of what the jury saw on direct examination versus what the jury saw on cross-examination. And keep in mind, we've only seen, like you said, a couple of minutes, and already he's starting out with the strongest points, which were everything he talked about, all those items that you talked about, item 26, 27, what have you. Well, it's not connected to my client. And the fact that there was that long duration of the 3-year period before it was tested, these are very wise and very strong points that he's making from the beginning. They always say primacy and recency when it comes to cross-examination. And he is starting off with a bang, and he's starting off strong.
So I'm going to ask you this last question. I know I've got to kick you loose here. At this point in the prosecution's case, you're the prosecutor now. Are you feeling good about your case?
At this point, I'm thinking to myself, maybe there are certain questions I should have asked on direct examination that could have brought the jury back. Again, I'm sure the prosecutor is seasoned. I'm sure the prosecutor knows her case like the back of her hand, and she probably knows that these were weak points for the prosecution. And so it's going to be interesting to see how she ends up doing her redirect examination once the defense attorney is done with cross-examination. I'm sure she's thought of these issues, and it's just a matter of time to see how she's going to address them and how she's going to rehabilitate the witness when it's her turn.
Yeah, and sometimes you know what the weaknesses are, and you get it out there, you deal with it, and you move on as quickly as you can. But certainly the cross is pointing out what appear to be some of those weaknesses. Okay, I'm going to thank and excuse you, Anna Yum. Thank you so much for being here. You were definitely most courteous, so you get to go first. We'll see you next time here on the network. Rich is going to stick around, keep working on that manifesto, Rich. We're going to go back into the courtroom now for more of that cross-examination.
Sir, did you know that when you received the blood stain on the headliner, that was after this trial started?
I did not know.
But you started that in April 25th of 23, just 2 months ago?
The headliner was, that was prior.
Oh, I'm sorry. The item that you received on April of 23 was what?
Those were the contact swab, non-blood area, rear driver seat, the blood swab of smear from rear of driver seat, and the contact swab of front of driver side door handle interior.
Okay. And you did not know that was after this trial started, correct?
I did not know.
And none of that came back to the DNA of this young man, Jamel, correct?
Correct. It was deemed uninterpretable, as well as one of the items I did not attempt to generate a DNA profile because there was insufficient amount of DNA.
Do you know what the delay was in sending that evidence to you?
Objection, outside the scope, speculation.
And did you receive any other items in 2023?
Yes, one last item, item 43.
And that was the door handle of the rear door? Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And did I hear you correctly that you first ran a test and it did not come back matching or belonging to or contributor to Jamel?
That's correct.
And did I also hear you correctly then you discussed something about your software with your supervisor?
With the technical leader, yes.
And then ran another test and had a 3-person contributor?
That's correct, yes.
And all of a sudden it matched or it was labeled as Jamel may have been a contributor?
That's correct.
What date was that, sir?
That was on June 1st, 2023.
Approximately 3 weeks ago?
That's correct.
Who requested that,
Objection, Your
if you know?
For suggestion,
Speculation outside the scope.
well, as far as outside the scope, so if he knows, he can answer.
Who submitted that item to you 3 weeks ago?
It would have been Miramar, the investigators.
Miramar Police Department?
Yes, I can look at my
Feel
submission
free.
report. It was submitted by a Miramar investigator. Mark Moretti.
Moretti.
Who is listed on the submission form.
And that was the only item that supposedly matched Jamel's DNA, correct?
I believe so. I can look back just to confirm it.
Please do.
But I do believe that is an accurate assessment. Yes, there was an item with the inclusionary leggo fish.
Could you tell these folks when that DNA was placed on, supposedly, on the door handle?
No.
It could have been placed a week.
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
How long can DNA stay on an item?
The DNA can persist on items. Again, as I mentioned, heat, light, moisture can cause it to degrade or become unusable. But if DNA is a
Adjourn till tomorrow. When can I expect these?
They are digital. I think they'll probably take until at least Monday. Because if you want them in hard copy, they are, I think I'm conservative in saying 400 pages.
Thank
Now, so it's clear, it's not 400 pages like a deposition transcript. It is 400 pages, and it's going to be more like look like a cell phone. And there might be 5 or 6 messages per page. So while it sounds very voluminous in number, it's not as bad as 400 pages would sound normally.
And this is what you shared with defense counsel.
Yes, they have the copies as well.
Thank you.
Digital.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Giving God ultimate love will lead every Christian to a closer walk with God. Giving God ultimate love helps us receive the strength to overcome adversity. God made it abundantly clear that death was never a part of His plan for humanity. Our culture has conditioned us to seek the hand of God instead of the heart of God, what He can do for us instead of who He is. God Himself tells us in Jeremiah 3:19, I would love to treat you as my own children. I wanted nothing more than to give you this beautiful land, the finest possession in the world. I look forward to your calling me Father, and I wanted you never to turn from me. Giving God ultimate love helps us approach the Word of God not merely as theologians, but as true lovers of the Heavenly Father's heart. Giving God ultimate love helps us disconnect from the world and reconnect with God more intimately. God made us the masterpiece of His creation. We are simply the recipients of the wonderful gift of life. Giving God Ultimate Love by author Buki Agula is available now at bukimusic.com and at Amazon.
To submit that exhibit to you to analyze?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
He knows he can answer, do you know?
I do not.
Thank you.
Counsel, is there anything else to this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Is he excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down, sir. You're excused. Ladies and gentlemen, my understanding is that's all the witnesses we have today.
Sometimes it's really just the question you need to get out there in front of the jury. Do you know why it took X number of years for you to get this material? Objection, it's speculation. Yeah, the witness probably doesn't know, but now the jury's asking that same question. Rich Schoenstein is here. He's been just writing notes copiously. I didn't even know what that word meant until I saw him doing this. So, first of all, my first thought, Rich, is redirect was helpful maybe in dealing with some of the delay in getting the materials, but I want to get your thoughts on that and other things. But let me squeeze in a break here first, because I know once you get started, it's very difficult to stop you. So, take a break, and we'll come right back.